Right, well, excuse me. Welcome everyone to our meeting here today. We've got the councillors, the members, and which they are, members of the committee, and also the public. So welcome. Okay, thank you. I've got to read out some general rules first, so I'll do that and then move on. Pardon, was that somebody speaking? I'm sorry, that's as loud as I can go. Okay, if I start shouting, you'll know it. Okay, cheers. You're right, here we go. Welcome everyone to the meeting. This meeting is taking place in the council chamber, Shepton Mallet, and we have members of the planning committee, officers, public speakers, and members of the public physically present in the chamber. We also have members of the public watching the meeting on Teams. Cameras within the council chamber allow us to film the meeting for viewers on Teams and also record the meeting. Therefore, any members of the public should be aware that they may be recorded even if they are not participating in the meeting. If this causes you any concern, then please let me know now. No? Okay, thank you. Members who have brought their own device with them should ensure that their cameras are switched off and, very importantly, their device, microphone and speakers are muted for the duration of the meeting. Otherwise, this causes feedback on the council sound system. Public speakers contributing to the meeting virtually should switch their cameras off and put their microphones on mute until they are invited to speak by the chair. It is not permitted for any other member of the public viewing by Teams to contribute to the meeting at any time. Should any member of the planning committee wish to speak, please raise your hand and catch the attention of myself, the vice chair, the legal advisor, or lead officers. When members in the chamber speak, remember to switch on your desk microphone so that all those in attendance and viewing can hear you. Please do not use the chat function within Teams for anything. All contributions must be made verbally. And please can all mobile phones be set to silent. And now we'll move on to the apologies for absence, please.
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Tony Robbins, Councillor Helen Kay, Councillor Benty Height and Councillor Adam Boyden, although Councillor Boyden is here to speak on the first item as a divisional member. We have Councillor Ros White substituting for Councillor Robbins and Councillor Mike Dunk substituting for Councillor Helen Kay. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. So that's good. We've gone through the apologies. Next, we've got the minutes of the we've got the minutes of the previous meetings to go through. So here we go. Oh, I should remind people to declare interests as well, please. Do we have any interest to declare?
Minutes first, Chair.
Minutes first, okay. It's the wrong way around here. Okay. Right, are we all there? Pages 15, page 16, page 17, page 18, page 19, page 20, page 21, and that's a lot. Thank you. So next we go. Next,
can we have a proposer and seconder?
Yeah, we need a proposer and a seconder, please. Proposed by Edric and seconded by, I think, Dawn. Martin over there. Yeah. And a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Right, okay. Now we're moving on to, it is the declarations of interest now, isn't it, I think?
Yes.
Yeah, declarations of interest.
Thank you. As I've shown support for the people for Packsaddle and the process, legally I'm stepping away from the vote, but I will use my 3 minutes and then step aside.
Thank you, Dawn. Anyone else? No. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to, I think, Alison, this is where you're going to come in and.
Public question time, Chair, but
yeah.
there are no public questions.
No, so that's okay. So we can move.
15 years that I lived there.
Pardon, can you turn your microphone off, please? Thank you. Okay, Alison, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to advise members of some changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, which came into force on the 12th of December 2024, and have made some significant amendments to the way in which decision making needs to be taken by the committee. So the NPPF, which was brought into force on the 12th of December 2024, a consultation period, confirmed a change to the way in which we determine the housing requirements and calculations of housing land supply across the country. For Somerset, this means an increase of 41%, up from 2,669 to 3,769 homes per year. That's our housing requirement going forward. That's a 41% increase from where we currently are across Somerset. And slightly reduced from what was in the original consultation, which represented a 46% increase. But that means that Somerset as a whole has 3.55 years housing land supply. For the east area, it means that we have a land supply position of 2.2 years. That means that the tilted balance is brought into effect, and the presumption in favour of sustainable development, which is set out in paragraph 11 of the NPPF. And the NPPF itself has been strengthened so that we now need to provide strong rather than clear reasons to refuse where the tilted balance is in play, presumption in favour of sustainable development. And that the government are saying that that is about strengthening the presumptions wording, notwithstanding that they have also referred in that paragraph to having particular regard to a range of other matters, which are set out in the full text, which I put up here. And the bold emphasises the changes that have been made, so it's now a strong reason for refusing rather than a clear reason for refusing. But they do also refer to having particular regard to key policies to direct development to sustainable locations, securing well-designed places and providing affordable homes. So that, for management purposes, came into effect from the 12th of December 2024. So any decisions that are made today need to be made in that context. And indeed, any decisions that the inspectorate would have dealt with after the 12th of December would have to be made in the light of that policy. I won't labour the point, but obviously we haven't got a 5-year land supply here. The land supply position has changed to reduce the number. That is a material planning consideration, and the courts have ruled in case law that the shortfall is significant. So if the shortfall is bigger of 5 years, then that is something that inspectors can take into account in making decisions. And then the final slide I'm just putting is some links to updated documents which have come on the back of the 12th of December updates to the NPPF. And there's a number of other reforms that are being proposed, and they're set out there, some of which will be brought forward in the Planning and Infrastructure Bill that is coming this year. I've asked the governance team to include those when they publish the minutes, so the slides will go onto the website and will be circulated to all members. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Alison. I think everybody's taken that on board. There's a question from Councillor Dunk. Of course, you weren't here for our earlier meeting.
Just for clarification, really, I thought at the I thought at the briefing we had that someone said that we already knew that we didn't have a 5-year supply, and the fact that it was either 4.8 or 2.5 was not particularly relevant. Is that changed?
Subsequent to that, we've had legal advice in relation to other appeals that are ongoing across the county, and they've pointed us to a decision made by the courts in 2018, which sets out quite cogently in the paragraph that it is a material consideration, the extent of the shortfall.
Thank you.
Okay, you happy there, Mick, with your reply? Yeah?
It's static.
Great. I'm glad to hear it. I hope that carries on all day. Thank you. Okay, so we're through there now. We can get start on agenda item 5, which is Packsaddle, I believe. So I think that's you, Nick, isn't it?
That's right. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so this is a full application for land at Packsaddle Way on the northern side of Frome. It's for the erection of 74 dwellings with 1 home for children with disabilities, and the application includes access, drainage, landscaping and all other associated works. The site is owned by Somerset Council. That in itself is not a material planning matter. So the applications should be considered and determined in line with all other applications. That's not relevant to the decision. Also, the financial status of the council is not a matter to be considered in the planning balance either. The application was subject to a viability review, which I'll speak about more later, and obviously is outlined in detail in the report. It's confirmed that all the triggered obligations can be met other than affordable housing. So there's a policy requirement for 30% and 22% can be delivered as demonstrated via the viability review. Okay, so this just slide giving the context of the site. As I say, on the northern side of Frome. The site is outside the development limits, and it's on 3 sides to residential development. That slide shows the location plan. Here's an aerial of the site. So it's a greenfield site with trees and hedgerows through it. It's set out in 4 fields. The lawful planning use is agricultural land. It has informal paths running through the site, which are well used. To the north, there is the settlement limit and the start of open countryside. As I say, all other sides are bounded by residential. So it's a relatively fine grain, and it's suburban houses laid out in a cul-de-sac. It's approximately 1 kilometre north of the town centre. There's a park nearby, and this one's showing the proposed access point. So just to get a wider confirmation of the wider area, there's a water treatment area to the west of the site, as well as the river. To the east of the site, east of the B3090, are a number of community facilities such as the cricket club, the Frome College, the theatre, Little Oaks Nursery, the Frome Medical Practice. So here we see the outline of the conservation area. So it's outside the conservation area. This one is showing the tree preservation orders on and near the site. So there was a provisional TPO. I'm just going to move that. Is that going to work? No. Okay, there was a provisional TPO within the site that ran for 6 months. So those 6 months have ended and the TPO hasn't been confirmed by the tree officer, but informal discussions have confirmed that the tree officer would intend to re-establish that TPO, that tree is worthy in his view of protection, and indeed it is protected as part of the development proposal, which we'll go on to shortly. So this slide is showing the public right of way. So they're on the boundary of the site. There is a slight correction. This area circled here is within the site. So it's close to the boundary, but is within the site. So this public right of way as I say, within the site, it is to be retained and the public have a right to use that, but no right to use the rest of the site currently. The fact that this public right of way is within the site does not change the conclusions in terms of application of Part 1 of DP 16, which I'll come on to shortly. So there are a number of informal paths running through the site. There is no legal right to access the site via these paths, and access and use of these informal paths is at the landowner's discretion and could be withdrawn at any time. So there are new paths. There are new paths proposed through the site as part of the development proposal, which would include a public right to use them in perpetuity. This plan is the landscape plan, and these purple lines show the proposed paths going through the proposed public open space. And the kind of magenta coloured paths are other paths that are adjacent to footways. So there would be a network of paths through the site, leading through to the public right of way to the north that would be maintained by the management company and retained in perpetuity as part of the development proposal. Moving on to the Green Space SPD. The site has been identified as part of this document, which was adopted in 2023. So this document links each of the identified sites within it to specific policies set out in Local Plan Part 1. So in this case, it's linked to policy EP1, which is local identity and distinctiveness. And the SPD and subsequent comments from the policy team have confirmed that the SPD is not proposing to link the site to DP2 or DP16. Further on DP16 shortly. In fact, now. So there's been quite a lot of comments about the application of Part 1 of DP16. So I thought it'd be worth putting the policy up there in black and white for everyone to see. So Part 1 essentially says that any existing open sport or recreation space should either be re-provided or it must be demonstrated that there's an excess of this provision. So it's the officer's position that this is non-applicable to this site, but the parts 2 and 3, which require sufficient open space as part of development proposals is relevant. So, as I say, officers consider that Part 1 of DP16 is not applicable to the site because it's normally considered to apply to public open spaces like play parks and so forth. And the site's not identified on the proposals map. And the green space SPD and associated audit confirms that the site is applicable to DP1 and is identified as green infrastructure. In the event that Part 1 of DP16 would apply, then it's considered that the development would still comply with this part of the policy. Because the public open space and paths connecting to the public right of way and access to the public in perpetuity, and this could be enforced by a Section 106 legal agreement. The current use for community uses is unauthorised and could be terminated at any time by the landowner. The public open space, the development as proposed, is within an accessible location, and it would provide equal or better benefit to the community than the current space. Moving on to the asset of community value. An overview of this is that it came from the Localism Act, and it's identified sites as a requirement for landowners to notify any intention to sell and offer community groups an opportunity to bid to purchase the site. There isn't a requirement to sell the land to any particular party. But the timeline in this case was that in July 2022, Live West and what was Somerset County Council confirmed their option agreement for the sale of the site. And the following January 2023, the application site was included on the then Mendip District Council's Register of Assets of Community Value. So this leads us to conclude that the asset of community value status doesn't restrict development in principle. There was no requirement for the then Somerset County Council to advertise the sale of the site or to consider bids from community groups, as the option agreement was already in place. The asset of community value status is a material planning consideration, and it demonstrates the high value to the local community of this space. And this needs to be weighed in the planning balance, be it the tilted balance, as discussed. Okay, moving on to agricultural land classification. This is the high level mapping that's put online from Natural England, which shows the site there as potentially a 3 good to moderate. More detailed mapping from Natural England shows it as 3 and 4 agricultural land. So the loss of agricultural land should be considered in the planning balance, but it's recommended that this wouldn't be significant and demonstrable harm. Quick slide here showing the local doctor's surgery accepting new patients. Obviously, there are national pressures on doctors' surgeries, but for the purposes of planning application, they are accepting new patients, and this is the catchment area, which includes the site. Okay, moving on to education. A little reminder of the tests, the national tests that the government requires for planning obligations to be agreed. So they have to be necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. they have to be directly related to the development, and they have to be fairly and reasonably related in kind and scale to the development. So those are the 3 rules that we have to meet before any planning obligations, monies and so forth can be agreed as part of a legal agreement. Application of this for education contributions means building works, so new schools or expanded schools, but not revenue, things like teachers, because that comes out of general taxation and it doesn't meet the tests. We're not allowed to ask for that. We can only ask for contributions if there is insufficient capacity to support the development that is proposed. And obligations can only be secured if there's policy and evidence to justify them. So this is in the report. So it's just confirmation really that the numbers of education has changed. This is part of the reason that the application was pulled from the last committee in November. So these numbers have been reviewed in detail and officers are satisfied that the final figure of 156,791 is accurate, robust, meets the planning tests, which links us in to the viability review. So there's been 4 different review documents that have been uploaded. So there's the initial report, and then there were sort of minor updates when clarifications were made on the obligations. So the important line is the bottom row, which is the final position, which has been checked in detail, and further discussions have been had with the District Valuer Service, which is the independent authority looking at viability, to confirm that the scheme is viable for all the obligations, 22% affordable housing rather than 30% affordable housing. And this has been agreed by the applicant. So officers, as I say, have looked at this in significant detail, and this is acceptable to meet the policy requirements. Moving on to ecology and BNG, biodiversity net gain. So there's the green area there shows the off-site bat mitigation area that's been agreed and is proposed to be secured via Section 106 legal agreement. So there isn't a requirement in this case to meet the 10% national biodiversity net gain requirement, because the application was submitted before that national requirement came in. So there is a requirement to see no net loss and some enhancements. So the applicant has demonstrated that that's well above that sort of no net loss and some gain requirement with those two figures there. So updated comments from the education team received yesterday. So that's also in the update section at the end of this presentation, confirming that the ecology team has identified that the baseline to assess the ecological position on the site, as well as the biodiversity net gain baseline, is based on a survey undertaken in May 2022. So it is understood that there was some site clearance which occurred in the following August. The ecology team has looked at that in detail.
Excuse me, be quiet, please.
So that information has been confirmed by Ecology and Natural England to be acceptable to assess and determine the application. So this is showing the proposed site plan. So there's a label up there to show that the 24% is public open space proposed within the site. So we can see the access to the bottom, green spaces either side, looking forward towards the linear green public open spaces. The roads are set out in a horseshoe shape. There's generous landscaping throughout. There's variations in form of materials, roof heights, and the development is generally designed to integrate into the local area with active frontages and so forth. In terms of materials, we have two different brick types with mortars and some vertical boarding, two different roof tiles, and other materials confirmed for the windows and so forth. And here's the plan showing how those materials would be set out. So there isn't a difference in sort of tenure or building size. Those materials are used throughout, so that there is no obvious difference in tenure and so forth. This is boundary treatment, so we've got brick walls and railings and knee-high railings, as well as fencing in private gardens. This is the heights plan. So the bright green one on the left is the disabled children's homes. That would be 1 story. And the blue, we've got some 1.5 story buildings and one 2.5 story building near the entrance, and the rest is 2 story throughout. Moving to the tree constraints plan, so we can see the field boundaries and those linear trees and hedgerows. There's the high quality tree T26, which you'll remember had a provisional tree preservation order on it. Next slide. And this is the tree protection plan. So the red dotted areas of the trees to be removed, and the majority of the trees are retained. There aren't any grade or category A trees to be removed, and that TPO tree is retained. The landscape plan. So you'll see in the bottom right, there's a key with the ecological enhancements on site. So things like bee bricks and bat boxes and bird boxes and things like that to be scattered through the site. There's also 175 new trees proposed, an orchard in the top right-hand corner, hedges and grass throughout the landscaping. In a bit more detail to hopefully see it a little bit better. Native hedgerows on plot boundaries and native climbers. I'll just show one on the south as well. So this one is showing water butts and cycle storage and waste storage and collection. It is all considered and planned for within the development proposal. This one gives a view of the house typologies so that we can see the different types and the variation coming throughout. Here's a CGI image submitted with the application to show how the development would look coming from the main entrance point. 2 more images looking through to the linear public open spaces proposed with housing either side. These are the elevations for the proposed disabled children's home. So that would have 3 bedrooms to facilitate 3 children. Here are the floor plans. So there are 8 sections of elevations that I put through in this presentation to give a flavour of the design proposed. The features replicate the surrounding existing development. There's a few photos to show that, but of course you all know the site, I'm sure. So I'll go through these to give a flavour of the proposal. Obviously, that's been assessed and summarised in the report as well. Okay, site photos. These are the 4 different fields that make up the site. I'm sure you all know the site, and there was a member site visit on Friday, so thank you to everyone who attended that. Some photos, so bungalows on Packsaddle Way, some are gable fronted. We also have 2-storey dwellings. There's a mix of materials, including render, red brick, sand-coloured brick that we tend to associate with Broome. There's dormer windows as well. In terms of planning obligations, remembering the rules that we have to follow, those 3 rules. There's affordable housing at 22%, so the policy requires 30% unless the applicant can demonstrate that there are viability constraints on the site, which has been demonstrated, so that affordable housing policy has been met. There's public open space contributions, education contributions, roundabout contributions in line with DP 27 as set out in Local Plan Part 2. There's a travel plan to encourage non-car use, surface improvements to the public right-of-way, delivery of the community orchard, including picnic benches, a management company to manage all the communal areas, SUDS, which is the drainage area, delivery and maintenance, confirmation that a covenant has been put on to ensure that the planting on the south of the site is retained, and that provision of the off-site bat mitigation habitat, as shown earlier, is all proposed to be secured as part of a legal agreement. Any affordable housing delivered outside the planning application via Homes England funding, for example, sits outside the planning balance for the decision today. So the decision needs to be based on the 22% affordable housing proposed. So in terms of updates since the publication of the report, we had ecology comments yesterday, as I mentioned earlier. So the ecologist has confirmed that they are satisfied that the survey work is acceptable, and any clearance on the site has been taken into account, and the baseline position is robust. The ecologist has confirmed a summary is put forward by the applicant, talking about the detailed issues on each topic, and overall concluding that the assessment is robust, basically. So SES, which is the ecology team, is there overall confirms that this is acceptable, has been considered in detail, and is satisfied. We're involved in enforcement investigations and has reviewed on that basis. In terms of other updates, since the committee report was published, 6 further objection points, comments have been received. There's a correction to some paragraphs to confirm that public right-of-way is in fact within the site. But again, this doesn't change any of the conclusions, including whether Part 1 of DP 16 applies. Paragraph 129, Table 2, which is the viability review summary table. The final row just forgot to have the date in of when that was published, so it's all online of when it was published, and it's just to confirm that was published on the 13th of September. paragraph 404. Oh, sorry, I said that. The overall conclusion is there's no changes to the recommendation as set out in the report. Final slide is the recommendation. So the proposal is contrary to the spatial strategy, including policies CP1, CP2 and CP4, but the tilted balance is engaged. So that tilted assessment, as Alison referred to earlier, is relevant. The application is not considered to represent significant and demonstrable harm, so it's recommended for approval subject to the Section 106 planning obligations and the conditions and informatives as recommended. Thank you.
And thank you, Nick, for that very good delivery there. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go on the public speakers now. The first one will be Fletcher Robinson from the CPRE, and you have 3 minutes, Fletcher.
Can you hear me? Thank you. I can start now. Thank you. This area of open space has been used for recreation on a daily basis by Frome residents for 50 years, and this long-standing use was formally recognised by the council when it was listed as an asset of community value in 2023. But the case officer's report bizarrely gives, quote, very limited weight, unquote, in the planning balance to that ACV listing, and further claims that LP policy DP16 on protection of open space is not applicable. This policy requires alternative open space of equivalent size to be provided in circumstances such as these. Members will have read the legal opinion commissioned by the objectors from a leading KC. It explains very clearly why policy DP16 is indeed applicable in law in this case. Members would be fully justified today in preferring the opinion of a leading KC to the case officer's interpretation of the policy. Members should consider refusing the application on the grounds of significant and demonstrable harm to the wider community through loss of the open space and the failure to provide suitable alternative open space of equivalent size. That is a strong reason in revised NPPF terms. Why is the provision of such alternative open space so important in this case? It is because there is a shortage of recreational open space on this side of Frome, as confirmed in Mendip's own 2012 open space survey. The application is also at odds with policy DP7 and with Frome Town Council's design statement. The scale of the proposed two-storey buildings is inappropriate in the context of low-pitched roofs of pack saddle bungalows on the west and south sides boundary. And the design doesn't respect residential amenity. The two-storey houses backing onto existing bungalows will be closer than the length of a tennis court to their rear windows. Our architect trustee says there would be serious overlooking issues due to the difference in heights. We also object to the non-policy compliant level of affordable housing proposed and to the suggestion in the officer's report at paragraph 293 that it will be acceptable to segregate the affordable housing. It is not acceptable, and an appeal inspector in Lancashire dismissed an appeal in 2024 for 95 houses for that very reason. Lastly, the council has so far rejected an offer residents to buy the fields at a substantial premium to agricultural value. A refusal today would facilitate the ACV process to get this site into community ownership where it belongs. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Okay, our next speaker will be Toby Colf, please. Yeah. And you have 3 minutes as well, Toby.
Thank you. Hello, councillors. I am here to represent an amazing community which has been disregarded by the developer and failed by its council. I am interested in truth. You may conclude this guy's a nut and you'll grant permission for this appalling application. That's your right. but be in no doubt if you take that path that you'll be inflicting profound, permanent harm on our community. You will also be making a seismic error, for as well as being objectively awful, not sustainable, not compliant, not viable, this application is also unlawful. This community has the determination, the grounds and the means to fight on. But I believe that you'll recognise the truth in our argument, a truth that you probably already feel in your bones, and that you'll insist on refusal. There are strong grounds for you to do so. This committee has demonstrated before that it can act with conscience and conviction. It must do so again today. Let's start with motivation. Why are we here? We're not here because of housing, no, but because of money. That's not a conspiracy theory. The council's decision document confirmed this. From there, this dud application has been driven and facilitated by an element of your council which is determined to sell these fields. The same department, with the developer, has instigated and propagated a false narrative, a narrative which implies that this community's long relationship with community fields is fiction, is unlawful, is meaningless. This council opposed our asset of community value application, but still the fields decisively passed that test. They are, rightly, indisputably, a rare asset of community value, a material consideration which must be given proper weight today. The inconvenient truth for developer and council is that these fields are, and have been for 50 years, at the heart of our community. They are loved and they are used daily, extensively. The benefits to mental and physical well-being, to community cohesion, to our children and to our grandchildren are huge. As the ACV panel concluded, the primary use of the land furthers the social well-being and social interests of the local community. I ask the committee to consider, is this really what good development looks like? Have we been treated justly? Would this application find favour if the council were not the landowner? No. We've been misled, belittled, ignored. The detailed PFP response you received, the analysis of our lawyer, the countless emails from residents contain the cold truth that the cost of this shoddy development would be the unlawful devastation of our community. Does it not say something that 2 of your colleagues have recused themselves in the last 40 hours? Does an email from an MP less than 24 hours ago not raise eyebrows? When Frome Town Council and faculty say this is not how affordable homes should be delivered, do alarm bells not sound? We are entitled to truthfulness, probity, a fair fight. This community deserves that, and this committee should insist on it.
Your
Thank
3
you.
minutes are up. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. The next one, public speaker, is Janet Haig, please.
Ecology and biodiversity net
And
gain.
you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of biodiversity, Packsaddle Fields comprises 8.8 acres of wild grassland, bramble, scrub and ancient hedgerows. It's teeming with wildlife, including protected and notable species, and is of international importance to commuting and foraging bats. Planning policy demands a net gain of 10% in each category. The ecological impact assessment proposes a net gain of just 7.3% hedgerow units and only 4.69% habitat units. The 10% requirement came into statutory effect in February 2024. It would be reprehensible if the planning authority didn't insist on at least 10% for applications made in the run-up to that date, particularly on a greenfield site and where the council is the landowner. In terms of baseline, Policy DP8 and the 2017 regulations presuppose that the planning authority properly understands the baseline biodiversity in order to make a judgment as to the impact of a proposal on that baseline. This is not the case here. Wholesale clearances raising grassland and scrub to the ground took place just 2 months into the ecological surveys and in the middle of bird breeding season. Absurdly, these have been dismissed as having had no impact on the surveys, the biodiversity baseline, or the assessment of the site's value for protected species. This is nonsense. As our independent ecologist confirmed, the site was desecrated in order to artificially lower the baseline and to boost the perceived BNG. It has still not recovered. Who ordered these clearances and why has never been officially explained. A freedom of information request was avoided for so-called cost reasons. However, we were told in person by a member of the estates team that the clearances were at the request of Live West. Sections 253 and 254 of the Planning Officer's report conflate the clearances with the installation of a cattle trough the following year. The clearances were in July and August 2022. This is misleading and misrepresents the extent of the destruction. Of grave concern is the fact that the owner of the land proposed for bat mitigation is in advanced discussions with developers to build 185 houses there. He also applied for the removal of over 470 metres of significant hedgerow in 2021. There is no financial detail available in the VRR for this deal. These facts inspire no confidence in the future security of the bat mitigation plan. In summary, the BNG figure of 10% has not been met and should be met. The clearances hammered the baseline analysis and the bat and other ecological surveys and are fundamentally and legally flawed. The land proposed for bat mitigation is itself under threat of development and is unsound. Policy DP8 and the 2017 regulations have been contravened. Please refuse this shameful application.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Nicola Crepney.
Thank you. Thank you.
You have 3 minutes.
This development of executive houses is not what Frome needs or wants. 275 objections confirm this, 0 support. The fields are outside the development boundary. They are listed in the green space audit. They were rejected in the council's own call for sites for multiple reasons, including viability issues and environmental protection, and they are an asset of community value. 30% affordable homes has not been met and is contrary to council policies. This would not be acceptable on a greenfield site beyond a settlement boundary anywhere else and is definitely not acceptable on council-owned land. The non-compliant 22% affordable homes viability report is not accurate and overstates the number of affordable homes possible because it excludes the expensive bat mitigation land. The Section 106 education contributions have been artificially reduced from 882,000, which was in place for 18 months, to overnight 156,000 following the 12% affordable homes valuation report. This 1 day later date is the only date missing viability review table 2 in the officer's report. Don't let yourselves be misled because this stinks. SEN contributions, a known issue within Somerset Council, have been excluded. The latest excuse is because the council are doing an education strategy review. This is unacceptable and frankly ridiculous. And the 22% affordable homes is not the 80-20 split of social housing and shared ownership you insist on for other developers. This development is not sustainable. Only 17 homes comply with future home standards, 57 do not. No heat source pumps, no solar panels, no grey water recycling, etc., all contrary to your climate emergency strategy. The building of a children's home was recommended by the developer, not the council. There has been no firm commitment from the council to ever build this during the last 18 months. It will not be decided until after the planning decision, so you must ignore this. Selling this land was not a democratic decision. There was no meaningful consultation with the community. The decision was pushed through by the council. Selling the land is for a capital receipt, which is not a planning consideration, but it's asset stripping. It will remove the existing and future benefits and crush our community. It is clear from the planning report that the harms associated with this entirely unsatisfactory, unsustainable development, together with the loss of a much valued green space, significantly outweigh any benefits. You, as custodians of this land for the people of Somerset, can help our community. I quote Bill Revens: "We set out to be a listening council and are proud of our record of taking on board the views of our residents before setting policy and making decisions. Our community can help you deliver your strategies and policies.
and have shown you our vision. Please listen to us. Refuse this application. Allow these precious fields to remain for future generations.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next speaker is Tim Taylor from, I can't quite pronounce it, KIFT Limited. Okay, Tim, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you. My name is Tim Taylor. I'm a planning lawyer. Members, I know you're worried about this going to appeal. Your officers have recommended approval and resources are tight. But what does an inspector do to appeal? They would look at policy and law. I'll do the same. DP16, the Council's policy on open space, is key because, oddly, it seems to have caused some confusion. You've seen it, heard about it, and I'd encourage you to reread it for yourself. It's very short. An inspector will understand what DP16 means, and so does PFP. It does not say, nor does it mean, that the public must have a legal right to access the site. Open space can be either publicly owned or privately owned. That's what the court confirmed in a case called Renew Land. The legal test, as the court held, is whether an open space is used by the public. PFP are not making this stuff up. The site is open space, which has been used by the public without resistance for 50 years. However, in the LPA's alternate reality, your officers say DP16 doesn't apply because public access to the site is unauthorised and the policy only applies to public open space. They've completely ignored the court's decision in Renew Land. A person's right to access the site is not the legal test. The test is whether the site is used by the public, and it is. And it gets worse. Natural England has said there's already a deficit of open space in the area, but your officers say, don't worry, the new open space will be an enhancement. 50 years, 8.8 acres of valued natural open space, and the development, small parcels of valueless standard estate green and an orchard 30 times smaller than the existing fields. DP16 means what it says. That's the law. It applies to Packsaddle Fields. The LPA's interpretation of DP16 is unequivocally wrong in law. An inspector will agree. A KC has said the same, and the court has also said the same and will do so again if asked. Members, you have a duty to act within the law. Let me summarise. As a matter of law, DP16 must be applied as the open space has been used by the public. The artificial reduction of the ecological baseline of the site was wrong in law and policy. The non-compliant low levels of affordable housing based on an inaccurate viability appraisal is a policy and legal failure of the scheme. Be under no doubt. PFP will judicially review this decision. Its KC has advised the claim is strong, and if you had legal advice to the contrary, I have no doubt you would have shared it. Members, please do the right thing, the lawful thing. Refuse this discredited application. If not, PFP will see you in court. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next person is from the Parish Council, or Town Council in Froome's case, is Jane Llewellyn, who's standing in for Councillor Steve Tanner. And Jane, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
The site is outside the development limits, and now we've had the opportunity to read the officer's report. This confirms our thoughts that the overall benefits of the proposal do not outweigh the harms.
Speak up.
Is that better?
Yeah, just speak a bit louder.
Speak a bit louder. Okay. You can hear me. Okay, that's good. So yes, we do not believe that the benefits outweigh the harms. So the harms are the loss of valuable green space, which in the officer's view is not covered by DP16 as it is not existing open space and because there is no public right to access the space. But the site has been listed as an asset of community value. as it furthers the social well-being of residents who regularly access the land. There's insufficient affordable housing. The additional 8% of affordable homes to be provided by Homes England funding does not carry any weight in making the decision and cannot be guaranteed. Frome Town Council have declared a housing crisis. We need 1 and 2 bedroom houses, not 3 and 4 beds. Whilst this may be compliant with planning policy, Somerset Council as the landowner and the housing authority should be insisting on a minimum of 30%. There will be a loss of biodiversity, making it necessary to provide off-site mitigation. The requirement is now at a 10% increase, and this application fails to meet the requirement. The design and layout does not comply with the Frome Town Design Statement design codes for the area. There will be landscape harm and an urbanising effect as a result of the built form that will change the neighbours' existing outlook and environment, which will impact on neighbours' amenity. There's a lack of carbon reduction measures. Only 17 of the 74 dwellings will have air source heat pumps and solar panels. The report states the proposal accords with policy requirements, and failure to exceed this further is not considered significant and demonstrable harm. We strongly disagree. The Section 106 education contribution. We still don't understand why no education contributions are required for the first and middle schools. We've seen the calculations for existing spaces, but if this is the case, why did other recent approvals in the Keyford area and the draft Section 106 for Saxonvale require a contribution for this? The loss of £750,000 to education in Frome is not a benefit. For the children's home, there's no confirmation that the funding for this is available. The report states, in the event that planning permission is granted, the estates team has 60 days to confirm if the disabled children's home is required. If by granted, this means once Section 106 has been signed and the decision issued, and it is then decided that children's home is not required, the consent as issued cannot be implemented, as the development would not comply with the conditions. The plans in Section 106 agreement would all have to be revised. Not only is this a complete waste of time and money, but the children's home is being given weight as part of this application, contribution to the benefits. If it's not required, then it shouldn't be given any weight. Somerset Council as the landowner have the final say. This should be an exemplary development, and it's a long way from that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to the other members now, which is Councillor Adam Boyden, please. If you'd like to come here to give your speech. As I understand, you declared yourself predetermined. Okay. You have 3 minutes, Adam, so quick speaking.
Thank you. Well, yes, I'll try. I'm predetermined, so I can't be on the committee. I did try and maintain my neutral status, but I sat on the fence so long it hurt, and I read the report and I went to site and I became an objector, and I'm here to represent my local community today. I've been a councillor for this area for over 13 years. I know the site. I know the wonderful local community that use it. The site has been used frequently and extensively as a green and open space for walking, dog walking and other informal recreation for over 30 years. People have used a signposted permissive path and a public right-of-way within the site, and there's evidence of extensive public use in the informal pathways that crisscross the site. I've had to point out that the officer's report contains several incorrect statements on the status of the footpaths and the nature of public access, which is important. But if it's not clear, you can defer the application until it is. I would also note there's over 265 objections and not one supporter, not one. You can clearly see the local community has formed a very effective community group, and they clearly care a lot about the effect this development would have on the green space they love. If this application is granted permission, we would lose something very special here. This site, as you know, is outside the local plan's development limit for Frome. It's not allocated for development. Also, the local recent limited update of the local plan did not include the site due to concerns about viability. open space use, ecology, and potential for refusal. It's a listed green space in the council's own green space SPD. It's an asset of community value because there was sufficient evidence that the current primary use of the land was community activity and informal recreation rather than agriculture. The site has not been in agricultural use actively for years, apart from a brief and disastrous period of cattle grazing in 2023 when cows kept escaping from the site and it is not stock-proof. Naturally, are concerned about the loss of accessible green space, which has physical and mental health impacts. There's also, as you've heard, compelling evidence that this site should be classed as open space in the planning system and therefore can be protected under Local Plan Policy DP16 and the National Planning Policy Framework in paragraph 104 because of the KC's planning lawyer's opinion that it doesn't matter about allocation or on a map, it matters that the site is clearly used for the public purpose of public recreation as defined as open space in the Town and Country Planning Act, 1990, section 336. It's the use that matters, not the legal status of that use. Any permission is vulnerable on this issue, as the local community, as you've heard, are likely to seek a judicial review, and they know their stuff. And I think it's actually safer to refuse this on that basis. The asset of community value is clear evidence of use as open space. There are other issues, of course, but the main issue is the open space here. So I can conclude. I urge the committee to refuse the application on the following strong reason for refusal. The development is outside the development limit, contrary to the spatial strategy, and it has an adverse effect on an area of open space and green space of public value, which has significant use by the community and an adverse impact on the character of the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, and you've done very well. Got there nearly within 3 minutes. Okay, Dawn, I believe that you're not you've declared an interest, but you're going to do your 3 minutes.
Yep,
I think you can
thank
do
you
the
very much.
speech.
Every member of this planning committee has received over 100 objection emails, and there are many more on the website. But one of those emails instructed us to be decent and vote against officer recommendation. I know that every single person in this room is decent, and officers doing their jobs and councillors representing their communities and the general public. And whatever the councillors choose to do today is in their democratic right to do, which still makes them decent. Everyone here today would prefer a field to a housing development, but we are up against a government whose current motto is build, build, build. Another email from the public said that this development is not needed in a town with enough houses. Well, that is simply not true. Nationally here in Somerset and in Frome, the planning inspector has made it clear that the housing crisis outweighs the harm of any development. There are a lot of people who live in the Packsaddle area and across Frome who have not objected to this development. And does that mean that they support it? There are some considerations to think about. Well, these are some to think about if this committee chooses to go against or support the officer recommendation. But as I've shown my support for the community and Packsaddle in the past, I cannot be part of the debate today. But I'm asking my colleagues to find every material consideration about this development to go against officer recommendation. Because we can't use emotional connection with these fields, wildlife in a climate emergency, mental health that the fields provide, the stories they create, and the memories made, and the communities connected because of the fields, to object. But we can ask about the fact that the application will change the character of the site, the dramatic impact on the countryside, flood risk, development limits, departure from the local plan, affordable and social housing, the green credentials of the housing themselves, the green space audit, the S106 contributions, the viability report, the asset for community value, sewage and the fly issue, the ecological survey. I know that we can find a way to show that this development harms the community, the town of Frome and the wildlife more than the 74 houses will benefit the town and the wider area. And today we can show the community that we have given our best shot to stand up to the planning inspector, and most importantly for the people and the residents who have these fields entwined in their hearts, embedded in their families and across generations. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Dawn. You need to move away. Go and sit with Adam would be good. Thank you. Next we have Mr. Gareth Jones, please. Thank you, Gareth. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address you and your members today. I'm Gareth Jones, Development Director at Live West, responsible for affordable housing. Live West is the largest developing housing association in the South West, and we are committed to addressing the severe shortage of affordable housing across the region and in local communities such as Frome. You have before you a detailed planning application which proposes a mixture of 74 dwellings plus a much needed home for children with disabilities. Of the 74 homes, 16, that's 22%, will be classified as affordable homes in planning. The percentage of affordable housing in planning is a product of a viability assessment agreed by the council. Due to our access to grant funding from Homes England as a strategic funding partner with them, it is our intention to deliver 22 affordable homes on site, that's 30%, 6 of those supported with grant funding. This respects the high demand for affordable housing in Frome. The delivery of this site for new homes will help the council meet its overall housing requirements and contributes towards its 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites, something that cannot currently be demonstrated. Your planning officer has carried out a detailed assessment of our proposals in her committee report, and she recommends the application for approval. There are no objections raised from any statutory technical consultees in respect of highways, flooding, drainage, landscape, ecology, or the impact on local facilities and services. I note concern from third parties about potential drainage issues. The drainage will be designed with runoff rates much lower than greenfield rates and will include suitable attenuation measures to ensure no flooding occurs. The application consequently offers betterment to that which currently exists in the surrounding area. Our proposals for the site respect nature as part of our overall proposals through the following. 36% of the site will be offered as green space, which includes ecological areas. Sustainable urban drainage systems, public open space, including a play area, a public footpath link, and a community orchard will be provided. 175 new trees will be planted. There will be meadow grassland planting, and 150 metres of hedgerow will be retained and enhanced. The rigorous planning process has resulted in the following benefits from the site's development: provision of open market and affordable housing to meet housing needs, provision of a much needed home for children with disabilities, a range of construction jobs in the short term, and expenditure in the local area from new residents, which will help to sustain local facilities in Frome. The development represents, therefore, sustainable development as defined in the NPPF. I can confirm that all conditions in Section 106 contributions are acceptable. So in accordance with your officer's recommendation, I would request that the application is considered carefully and approved, and that planning permission is granted.
And thank you very much. Okay. I'm getting ready. I think that's all of our speakers. I would like to remind the audience that you have to be. You're not down, so you can't speak. I would like to remind the audience at this time to not make a lot of noise. And if you don't like something that's said, you don't like it, okay? Or if you like it, you like it. So please don't try to, I won't say intimidate, a bit of a strong word, but don't try to influence. Okay, thank you. So we're going straight to the group, to the committee. Who would like to open? Is that Martin L? Yeah. Okay, Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Could I be very clear about the status, because I've looked through the report and not completely found it, the status of ACV. Who confers such a status, and in which case, who conferred it in this particular case? Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to take up that? Nick, you appear to be the one volunteer to answer that question.
I can do it.
Or Martin, you do it.
Yeah. To answer Councillor Level's question, it's the council who accept or consider applications for ACVs, and there is a panel, separate legislation to town and country planning legislation that consider applications from community groups as to whether an asset, piece of land or a pub or other asset is put on the ACV register. Now, the consequences of that are set out in the officer report. It's essentially a mechanism to allow time, if the land is going to be sold by a landowner, for community groups to get a bid together to seek to acquire the land. And there are moratorium processes in there to allow that to happen. So the fact that the land is registered as an ACV is material in your considerations this afternoon. It does not prevent the landowner from selling the land to who they like, and that is not material to your consideration, who the landowner chooses to sell to, or any capital receipt the landowner might receive. That's not material. But the fact that the land has been assessed by the panel and is an ACV is material. And I think, Nikki, do you want to say anything more about your assessment of it?
No, thank you. I think that covers it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Thank you, Nick. Right, I'm looking for. Oh, Martin L wants to come back, so I've got to let Martin come back first.
Do you mind if I come back?
No. I said come back.
Could I be forgiven for observing a slight inconsistency in the fact that on the one hand, this council has conferred this status. On the other hand, it is now looking at a planning application on the same asset. At the moment, I'm seeing an inconsistency there, but I'd be happy to be clarified or made that clear to me. Thank you. End of my question.
Thank you. I think Martin's going to give you a reply.
It's just to make it clear that the status of an ACV is not the same as the land being registered as a town or village green. That is a different status, different registration, different process. So the land is not registered as a village green. If we were, we've been having a different conversation. But I take your point. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Martin. Both Martin. Claire, you're next.
I heard your voice drop then, Chair. Not
intentionally.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I'm disappointed with this application and Somerset Council's position, and my heart sinks as examples of undermining the local community. The asset of community values just seems to be dismissed in the report. It was not an area that was in the local plan, and it's a green space, and it wasn't allocated for development, which shows that in the framework of engaging and consulting with community, it wasn't part of the picture. I think stating that there was no legal right for access is undermining the local community, as has been discussed, and that's in the report. The deal that has been done on behalf of the local community is come up short with the affordable housing, 22%, the education 106 agreement, nearly 900 going to 156k. I'm sure that value just disappearing. It could have gone somewhere, and it could have been argued and fought over. The the replacement of open space. It seemed to me what was said was, oh, it's the housing application itself. like the Emperor's New Close. I can't see the open space really there. We were told, that I may be saying that this may be a slightly different way of looking at it. We were told there's no harm from it not being agricultural, removing it from being agricultural. When that sounds odd to me, really, in a current climate emergency. I believe this application creates harm, and I don't represent Frome. I'm Mendip South. I know Frome very, very well. The villages I represent do access Frome. I care about, I've been told it's not material reason, but I care about mental health and people's well-being. And that's why I'm on Somerset Council. So am I going to sit by and not be disappointed by this application? I am disappointed by this application. I think the material reasons are to do with the harm to the landscape and the character. And I'm not a legal expert. We have legal experts here, but the legal position of Somerset Council, I think, is being questioned quite effectively. And we are told with no uncertain terms about the legal stance we take. Well, we've been told it from another legal representative here. So what are we to do as members when you're getting conflicted legal advice? That's my question to Martin.
Okay, Martin, you've got a one to answer there.
You put two lawyers in the room, you get three opinions. So I think the point you're making, Councillor, relates to DP16. Now, what we're saying in relation to policy, certainly that the land was identified as green infrastructure in the SPD, to which policy DP1 certainly applies. That's local identity and distinctiveness. And you've mentioned some of those things in what you just said, where under that policy, all development proposals should contribute positively to the maintenance and enhancement of local identity and distinctiveness. And where a development would adversely affect or result in the loss of features or scenes recognised as distinctive, the council must balance up those issues, the degree of impact against the wider benefits. Now, that policy, DP1, we all agree, is applicable in this case. So that is something that you should be bearing in mind in your considerations. Where we disagree with the opinion that's been given, and Nikki did go through this in the slides in detail, as to whether DP16, which is the open space policy, applies. And the report sets out why we don't agree the first part of that policy applies. And that was with the benefit of the input from the legal department. But Nikki goes further in the report, the officer goes further in the report, in that if we're wrong on that, if DP16 does apply, then looking at that position, the use of the land by the public is not authorised, could be terminated on short notice. The barrister themselves refer to what's called a bare licence, which can be terminated on short notice by the landowner. Let's not use the council, just call it a landowner. We have to treat them like any other landowner. So the benefit of that could be lost at any time. So what we say and what the officer says in the report, compare that, the potential loss of that use tomorrow, against what's been provided by the development, which is public open space, which can be secured in perpetuity through a Section 106 agreement. That's so what the report is saying is that even if we're wrong about the applicability of DP16, there is still a benefit. It would still comply with that policy. Now, I'm sure the friends would disagree with that analysis, but that's how we've come to that position. Sorry.
It's a quick follow-up question, Chair, if I may. So
Sure.
the fact, is it the same to say the future removal of public access potentially by the landowner is the same as no access? Because I don't see that as the same thing, because we can't predict the future. Because what if we said that you know, that the future, that access would not be removed? So it's at the current status at the moment, there is public access and a history of public access, but the foundation of the application report is that there is no, and it's seen as a strength of approving this application. So I think if we remove that, it makes the approval weak. And I notice you're nodding as I say that.
No, I take your point. I think the argument turns around the accessibility of the site and whether that use is authorised or not. Now, we disagree, officers disagree with the interpretation that the Friends have given and their KC. You might take a different view, Councillor, and the committee might take a different view. So that's, you're entirely entitled to do so.
Okay, thank you, Martin, for your answer or reply, and thank you, Claire, for a good question. Mick, it's your turn.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I have to say at the beginning, and it's not a planning consideration, but the Somerset Council has really covered itself in glory as the landowner, and it does have a responsibility as a landowner, I think. Otherwise, what are councils for? Anyway, just to clarify the point, Mendip District Council were the people who pushed forward the community asset, whatever it value. They were the council that actuated that, just to clarify that point. And so Somerset Council, County Council were the owners. Is that true to say?
So if I can sort of dominate the answers, because but my understanding is that the County Council, before its local government reorganisation, was the landowner. The landowner now is Somerset Council, since we've merged. The application for the ACV was considered by Mendip.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the originator of that application. It was, but Mendip's panel made the decision, which is the answer I gave to Councillor.
Absolutely. And it went through the due process with Mendip Council. Yes. Okay.
Okay, Mike, you've got that?
Yeah, fine. I just wanted to clarify that because it wasn't entirely clear. I think what I'm looking at with this application is a failed opportunity, but also it's a disappointing application. I'm looking at the losses, and I think we should start with the loss of productive farmland, because although the owner is a council, they haven't really farmed it. It is still productive farmland. And as I think that bears some weight. The loss of public amenity is clear and very evidenced. The housing does not really fit in with the existing housing, and I think would have an adverse effect on the character of the area, and that's fairly demonstrable. There are other small things, like there's no SEN contribution, which is disappointing. And the habitat that is secured for the bat mitigation, I'm not sure how that is secured at the moment. Have Live West actually bought that from the landowner, Mr. Brunt, or is that hanging in the balance? So I'm a bit worried about that for a start, because it's next to the land but not on it, and so that's quite important, really. The sort of 17 houses which are affordable houses having air source heat pumps is and solar is a good thing, and it's quite sad that the rest of the houses don't have that, and they only comply with the legislation as existing and not the future housing standard. So that's a shame, and I think that's a negative. Although technically in terms of planning, we can't actually say that we can force anyone to provide any more than that. So, but it's a downside. And we're only getting 22% affordable housing on there, which again is lamentable when you think that the council own this site and know how much Frome needs affordable housing. And yet somehow you get this disconnect between a council that owns land and is not prepared to forget the financial side of the affair and say, we'll make this happen. Now, this happened before at Saxon Vale, and I have to say with Mendip Council, it was a very sad tale. And I just don't want to see it repeated, to be very honest. And there is also the small issue of the Wessex Water, who did complain about the fly issue, which is where flies breed in copious amounts at certain times of the year and basically make it very difficult for the local people. And they did complain about this and then realise that they might lose that at an appeal and so withdraw their approval. Doesn't mean to say that there won't be a problem with flies. It's just that Wessex Water are not prepared to support that now. So sorry, I've had my say. And it's not for me to add up all those. It's very difficult to add up all those negatives and say that the planning gain is sufficient. I don't think personally it is, but that's just my opinion at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mick. I just got one query with you there. You said 22%. I'm pretty sure that Mr. Jones said it would be a total of 30%. No? It was 22%. Okay, thanks for that. Okay, who's next? Barry?
Thank you, Chairman. I hear Martin's opinion on the legal side of it, and we've had a written KC's opinion on their side of it, and I don't know who's right. And I guess the best thing is for you two to end up being... Pardon?
Please, can you in the audience be quiet?
Oh, well, sorry, I beg
we
pardon.
Can't help that.
My fault, Chair. I'll shout a bit more. Sorry. And we've got these two different legal opinions, and I don't know which is right, and I don't know if anybody on the committee knows which is right. And I think the best thing is if it does to court and you get it jolly well decided, for the sake of these people and for the sake of Somerset Council. There have been 275 objections. I think that came from Nikki on the website, I'm not sure. And 6 further objections since the committee report was published in October last year. I had 150 emails over the weekend, and I'm sure all the other councillors have as well. And I start answering them, but I thought, I've got to go to bed at some stage. So I haven't answered anybody, and apologies to all those who wrote and didn't get an answer. The viability review, when we start talking about viability, I'm taken back to the police station at Wells, where we started off with a contribution of £440,000, I think. And after a discussion, we managed to get it down to 120, 110, 120. No matter what the figure is, we managed to negotiate it down.
I'm going to butt in a minute. Sorry, the contribution was about 400. It came down and we managed to negotiate it back up. We got it the wrong way around.
We got it back to 220. Yeah. It went from 440 to 110 back up to 220. So we managed to negotiate really from 440 down to 220. So that was pretty good, wasn't it? And I'm not sure whether saying, let us carry on these discussions with the developers and we'll bring you better issues. And if you objected to it and it went to appeal, I'm not sure that that's going to happen. I mean, we're already talking about viability and we've managed to negotiate, somebody's managed to negotiate the education contribution down from 882,000 and it's now 156,000. I could do that. That's easy. So I'm a bit wary about these talks about viability, and I think the first thing that will suffer will be the children's home. Now, as a sign of good faith, if this developer said, I'll build the children's home first, then you know I'm not messing you about and I won't ask to build 6 extra houses later on. Now, I think that would be good, but probably couldn't be conditioned and probably wouldn't be acceptable to the developer either. But I think that would be a really nice, a good thing for them to do. But wouldn't it have been nice if Somerset had offered the land to the people for Packsaddle first? Maybe they did, I don't know. But it appears not. But wouldn't it have been nice and transparent, as Somerset professed to be, to say to these people, yeah, you can have this land, 8 acres, whatever it is, at building prices, and let them see if they want to buy it. And then they wouldn't have a reason for being here this afternoon because they couldn't afford it. And the only other thing is, I think Mick touched on bat boxes and bird boxes. There's 126, I think, scattered through the site. Who's going to look after those when it's all finished? Or will they fall out of the tree and that would be the end of it? Nobody would bother to do anything about it. All these things, they can't be conditioned and they can't be made to happen. And I think the developer just run rings around the whole thing before he's finished. Thank you, Chairman.
And thank you, Barry, for that. Very interesting. Now, next is Martin D.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nikki, for that presentation. Can I ask, this has been going on for a long time, so there's a few questions I want to ask. The land was owned by Somerset, originally Somerset Council. It stood there for 50 years, intended for a school and was never used. At what point, when it was put, was it put up for tender? Did we welcome bids for this land?
Yeah, please, Nick.
I've got supplementaries, if I may, afterwards.
Okay, I'll go ahead and answer that one, and then I'll take the next ones. That's not part of the planning assessment, so it's not been submitted as part of the application. So we, as the local planning authority, just need to determine the application as it was. So we can't say, I'm afraid.
Okay, so it may or may not have been an open tender, or it may have just been given to, the option may be given to Live West. So what are the reasons for reducing the affordable houses from 30% to 22%? What reasons were given for doing precisely, rather than valuation? Is there anything you can enlighten us on that?
Yeah,
thank you. It's to do with the ground conditions of the site being more expensive to build the site than a standard greenfield site. So there's national planning guidance that sets out a requirement for developers to get a certain profit level, basically to make sure that developers have an incentive to deliver. So if there's no profit, no one's going to build anything, is the basic justification for that national policy. So we have to respect that. And where there is unusual situation when that level of return is not anticipated, then the policy, national and local policy, allows for the viability information to be submitted. So the council then outsources that to a professional viability expert, in this case the District Valuer Service, who looked at that and said all the assumptions on profit levels and build costs and obligations and all the other things that go in have justified why there needs to be some discretion on that. So there is a policy basis. It happens fairly regularly that these come in and they're reviewed. So that's set out nationally, that there is then that discretion.
Yeah, again, I've got a couple more. Yeah.
Okay, Martin, make them quick and
well, yeah, as quick as I
as
can.
quick as you can.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to get home as well. Yeah, it's funny. It always comes down, doesn't it? You know, when we have affordable housing, the 30% always gets chiseled away under viability constraints. I'm just a bit cynical about that, as you might be surprised to hear. Why? Can I ask why? What reasons were given for reducing the amount of money that was due to go to the children's home?
Yeah, no, there hasn't been a reduction in the money for the children's home. The option agreement, as I understand it, includes a commitment from Live West as the applicant to deliver the children's home, the shell of the children's home, and then it's for the assets team in Somerset Council to decide whether that's required. So Live West has committed to doing that, but they're just waiting to hear from the assets team at whatever time that would come forward, whether that would be the case. So there hasn't been any reduction in that. It's just that there isn't that certainty, that complete certainty from the estates team to confirm that it would be delivered. So I've had various discussions with them, and they have confirmed that they've got budget in place and they do intend to deliver that. Otherwise, they wouldn't have included it in their option agreement to start with. So, but because it isn't secured formally as part of the planning process in the legal agreement or via condition, then that's why you've been advised to give that lower weight, because we can't confirm in planning terms that it would be delivered.
Right, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a proposal.
Yeah, you're free to make a proposal, Martin.
I'd like to propose that we refuse this application. I'm going to give 4 reasons, some of which may be contested. One is it's outside the development limits. Secondly, it's the adverse effect on biodiversity. By that, I don't think we've heard enough of how we might protect this space from the experts in the room. 3, I'd like to just mention the road access, if I may. This site was meant to be designated a school, a primary school. Presumably it would have had a car park, presumably it would have had a playing field. If you look at that site, you look at the entrance to that site, even bearing in mind that you would have to take away an entire row of established trees to access it. The only way 2 vehicles could pass one another would be to do that. And what we have heard today is this site, this development, is a cul-de-sac. It's about the biggest cul-de-sac I've ever seen. And the idea that you can have 74 houses and 100, 140, say 120 cars and other vehicles gaining access to that site means that you're going to have a very serious highways issue going in and out of that space. And we heard this morning that is one of the conditions that the government has wrapped up in the recent document they released. So that's my 3rd point. My 4th point is probably going to be dismissed, but I would like to consider on the lack of affordable housing, which I think, frankly, is deplorable. And then I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I believe you've got a seconder with Councillor Sully. Am I right, Claire?
Yes, Chair. I'd like to second that. I think we need to wrap in that, Martin, if it's okay, DP1, the harms to the local identity and the distinctiveness of the area. So I think that's a sort of overarching, if you're happy to consider that, because I think that's a strong, we've been advised that's a material reason, that's strong.
If that's a material reason, I'm perfectly happy to accept it. Thank you, Claire.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. And also, I think the open space issue of the asset community value and the loss of that, but I think you've kind of, that's within what you're saying. And that's DP16, which I think is being legally contested at the moment.
Okay, thank you for that, Claire. Rob, you're the next one on the list.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we've had a lot of information thrown at us. I've written down a lot of questions, most of which has been answered. The elephant in the room, I think, is this school. Apparently, reading through it, this site was purchased for a school in the first place. Question 1, why wasn't the school built? Perhaps some local members could tell us. Secondly, there is now a school again proposed, but is it proposed? I mean, some of us longer serving members can remember the 106 for Tadley Acres estate with a spanking new primary school in it, which got sidestepped by the developers who ended up with houses all over the place, which means the children of Shepton are still in Victorian classrooms. How can we confirm that this school is actually going to be built? That's the big question.
Excuse me.
It's a home for children.
Yes, I appreciate that, but how can we? I mean, going through the debate, we can't confirm that it's going to be needed. So how can we confirm it's going to be built? It's you know.
I've got to be honest, Rob. I can't quite work out what you're saying. I think we've already can we guarantee that it won't be lost? Children's home, yeah.
Can we guarantee it won't be lost through a loophole, Chair? That's the basic.
Hold on, let's let Nick answer you. She's eager to tell you.
Thank you. I think you mean the disabled children's home rather than a school. So the site. Yeah, I think we got a bit confused because it was bought in the first place for a potential school and not coming forward on that basis. But yeah, there's a disabled children's home as part of the proposal. So as I said previously, the assets team, as part of the option agreement with the applicant, has put that forward as part of the proposal. They've said, and the applicant has agreed to build it out, the shell of the building with the asset team, or the council would do the fit out of the disabled children's home if that comes forward. There is no planning mechanism to secure it, so it needs to have limited weight in the planning balance.
Okay, thanks, Nick. I can see that Rob's not convinced. Okay. Right, okay. We've got a few more to get through. Susie is next.
I mean, I'm just finding this whole thing quite depressing. It seems to me that this land is the very definition of an asset of community value. And you've only got to glance across the room to have that made absolutely crystal clear. Not one of us in this room today can say that we have seen this in the last 2.5 years or anything even close to it. So how we can sit here and consider that this should not be an asset of community value just beggars belief, quite frankly. I've also been really disappointed, I know it's beside the point, but to hear that we should treat the council as any other landowner. We're not any other landowner. The council surely at a certain point...
You're supposed to do that.
At a certain point, the council is answerable to the community. Surely.
Okay, thanks for that, Susie.
I find a children's home, which is possibly only a shell, possibly not going to happen. And even if it did happen, would only make provision for 3 children, really not a massive benefit. So, you know, I think the sooner we go to the vote and vote this down, the better.
Thank you. I'm gonna take 2 more speakers if they want them. No, sorry, Mick, yours is gone. It's going to be Ros and Phil. And so, Ros, you can go first if you wish.
Thank you. I'm not going to repeat what a lot of other people have said, other than I do recognise for many people losing your facility, which you've regarded as something you have a right to, and a view is really painful. And we see that everywhere, and I do recognise that. I represent a rural community, and I'm particularly concerned, and I want to ask this question very clearly. In many rural communities, there are informal acknowledgements that you can walk across or use landowner's land, and as long as you behave reasonably, the landowner turns a blind eye as you trespass, and you use the land for walking a dog, for health, for well-being and whatever. And I'm really concerned that we need to recognise that this often goes on for generations, and we need to be clear about this right to do that and then move away. And the other thing is, I'm very aware at the moment, right across the county, community groups are negotiating permissive paths so they can have walking and wheeling and cycling routes across the county. And so the use of the word permissive path is really critical, because that is respecting the landowner but getting permission for the community to use it for a specific reason. And so the question I have of the officers is, can you confirm, has this site got a permissive path? Has this site got have community rights to the access to this site? And what has the landowner formally done to give them those rights? Because I think that's really important, because the wider community and many of the villages I represent would be absolutely horrified if we're in a situation where the landowner can turn around and say, look what's happened, we're losing the right, you can no longer use the fields, you can no longer do this or that. And therefore, I know it's an aside from the planning application, but it's really clear, it needs to be really clear for the community, the wider community, and there are people listening to this and journalists, etc. Is there a permissive path? Has there been permission given? And what is the actual status of this land? Because I think that is important for the wider community, not just for this particular community group. Thank you.
Thank you, Ros. Right, who would like to give the answer to Ros's questions, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Wake. So the estates team has confirmed that no permission has been given verbally or written to access the site. So it's officers' understanding that there is no right to access the site other than the public right of way to the north, which I showed on the site. So there is.
Can you be quiet, please, while the officer's speaking? Please respect the right to reply. Thank you. Yeah, but please be quiet and let the officer speak, please. Thank you kindly.
In this case, the landowner, regardless of who that is, has decided to try to develop the site. So because there is no right of access or use of that site, they are within their rights to submit a planning application. So, you know, although people do access the site and that has been tolerated by the landowner previously, there's been no problem. Now the landowner would like to develop the site so that access would cease. Or at least be swapped for the proposed access as part of the development, which then the local people would have a right to then use it, be it alongside the development proposed. I hope that's answered your question.
Thank you. Thank you. For total clarity, the landowner has not given them a written or provided a permissive path across the site.
That is what I've been told by the estates team, yes.
Okay, thank you for that.
Right, thank you both. I just want to point out to Councillor Helen Kay, who seems to be online, you must not use the chat function, please. Okay, Helen?
Yes, sorry, Nick, sorry.
Thank you. Cheers.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, it can be turned off. It can be turned off, Mr. Chairman. We don't have to see them.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Right, one more person, Phil, and then we're going to go to a vote on Martin's thing. Well, the officers will come back in a minute, but Phil.
Thank you, Chair. I might look rather old, but I can tell you, 55 years ago, I worked at Packsaddle Farm. I know these fields really, really well. They are good agriculture fields. Were. They haven't been farmed for 50 years. We had a few imported cows last year who couldn't stay in the field because there was no fences. This, to me, is East Hill revisited. Those of you in the room that were here when we turned down East Hill, which was for affordable houses on the same sort of grounds that it was being walked, environment, biodiversity, etc., etc. I see no difference here. We turned down one, we should turn down the other one. The other thing I would like to add to Martin's list, there's no emergency exit to this proposal. There's only one in, there's no way out in case of emergency. And I could take myself back those 50 years. There were horrible, horrible flies then, and they used to bite. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. And yeah, I think a few of us remember the other one at Froome. Yeah. I think the officers want to come back on the reasons for refusal. So if we could do that, please.
Are you right, fine?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm looking at Simon. Okay, if I could go. Yeah. Okay. Yes, just going to the reasons for refusal put forward by Councillor Dimmery, and then it's been added to by councillors. Firstly, because we're in the tilted balance situation again, then any refusal has to be on the basis that the harms significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So I'm presuming that that's part of the proposal, that the harms do that in your mind. Firstly, outside of development limits, that's correct. secondly, in no particular order, secondly, DP1, policy DP1, which I went through with Councillor Sully, that is relevant. You might take the view that the application does not contribute positively to the maintenance of local identity and distinctiveness, and would have an adverse effect on the features, and the loss of the features is significant in your mind. So you are perfectly entitled to come to that view if that's your view. Policy 16, DP 16, the part 1. Now, the advice from officers is that officers consider that does not apply in this situation for the reasons we've set out. However, if members, having read the opinion from the Friends barrister, take a different view, you are able to do that. Officers would not advise you to do so, but you are again free to do so if you, having read that, are satisfied that DP 16 is engaged in this case. The lack of affordable housing, or the failure to meet the policy requirement of 30% on the affordable housing, is a difficult one because your policy allows for that figure to be reduced if there is a viability issue. So your own policy allows that figure to come down if there are viability issues. So I think that's tricky to argue that as a reason for refusal. And the last two you mentioned, Councillor, were the access road, perhaps linked with the emergency exit issue, and biodiversity. And for those, I'm going to move to the planning officers to comment on those, if I may, Chair.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Is that going to be Simon, or is it going to be Nikki? Nick?
Yeah. Thank you. In terms of access, we do have Emma on the call if you'd like to bring her in for any questions. We have had consultation comments from the Highway Authority, so there aren't any objections or concerns in terms of the access. There hasn't been any requirement for an emergency access, so it's considered safe and policy compliant. So you might just want to think about how that might be defended at appeal if you choose to include that as a reason. So I wouldn't recommend to include that highways one. I don't know if you want to bring in Emma with the chair's permission. Thank you.
Emma, you are there still, I think. Could you come in on that one, please?
I certainly can, Chair. Yes. The layout as set forward in the application has been considered by the Estate Roads team, not the Estates team. It's very much a different team. It's part of the Highways team. There is a mix in the layout of what is classed as a Type 3 road, which is an access street, and a Type 4, which is a shared surface street. The assessment by the Estate Roads team brought up no issues that couldn't be resolved at detailed design stage.
Okay, thank you. Right. Do we have any more comments, Nick?
Sorry, I forgot to add about biodiversity as well. So that has been looked at in detail by the ecologists and Natural England. So we don't have an objection from those consultees on biodiversity. There isn't a requirement to deliver the 10%, so we can't justify that in policy terms because of the date that the application would be submitted. So again, I wouldn't encourage inclusion in that.
So I think to summarise, our advice as officers would be outside of development limits, certainly DP1, you could take a view on that. DP 16, we wouldn't advise that.
Could you just remind us what DP1 and DP 16 is?
Yes, of course, although my computer is now. So policy DP1, Councillor, relates to local identity and distinctiveness. And that's all development proposals should contribute positively to the maintenance enhancement of local identity and distinctiveness. And also, where a development proposal would adversely affect or result in the loss of features or scenes recognised as being distinctive, the council will balance up the significance of the feature to the locality, the degree of impact, and the wider benefits would arise from the proposal. So that's DP1. DP16 is the public open space issue, which we've gone through, which relates to replacing the loss of public open space. And officers have given you advice as to whether we think that applies in this case. Officers don't think it does. The Friends have provided you with advice, Casey's advice, which say it does. Now, you might prefer that advice. The other reasons for refusal set forward, biodiversity, access, and the lack of affordable housing, we would probably encourage you not to include those because of the difficulty in defending those on appeal. And as I've said earlier today, each and every reason for refusal has to stack up on its own two legs. Those issues can be raised by the parties if we get to an appeal, and an inspector would have to consider those, but we need to be able to defend each and every one of those reasons. So that's the officer's position, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Martin, as we're going to look at, no, I'm sorry, Mick, I've stopped. I'm talking to Martin now about your proposal to refuse. So have you decided to stay with it and keep with the same ones as you already had, as are defendable?
Yes, I think generally, but I'm still, given that the designation of this area that was achieved by the community group, I'm still quite keen to keep in DP16 as a public open space. I think they've got a very good argument there.
And I second that.
Okay, so you can keep them in, yeah.
Yeah, I take the other points sort of reluctantly, but of course, you know, we want to ensure we have cast iron reasons for turning this down and not. So I accept the other reasons for not putting forward other points for not that Martin suggested we shouldn't put forward, or even they perhaps prefer if we didn't. I don't know if we need a summary again. Sorry.
I think we do.
I'm looking for Claire and others to.
Well, Claire is your seconder, so I'm happy to listen to Claire. But Martin will give you the summary.
And please correct me if I'm not including things that councillors. I'm looking to the proposer and the seconder for this. So the development the harms of the development will significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, because firstly, it's outside of development limits. Secondly, it's contrary to policy DP1, local identity and distinctiveness. And thirdly, fails to comply with part 1 of DP16, which is the public open space policy.
Chair, may I ask Martin a quick question? Do we need to explain why we think it doesn't apply to those? Because it's to do with the asset of Community Valley, the permissive paths and all the things.
I think we've got that from the debate.
Right, thank you very much.
Councillors.
Okay, Martin, so you're happy as the proposer, you're happy as the seconder.
Quick question. Yeah, quick question. So the landscape impact, is that the same as DP1?
Look to the.
Go for it.
Yeah, there's a specific policy, DP4, Mendips landscapes, if you want to reference that one.
And that would come under DP1?
DP4.
Oh, DP4.
Yeah, that would be an additional.
Proposer, please, could we consider DP4 as well? The impact on the landscape? Yeah.
I'm happy to go along with that. Thank you.
Okay, so before we actually go to the vote, now we have it sorted. Martin, I'm going to ask you to read out what the vote actually is, and we'll go from there. We'll take a vote.
So to refuse the application on the grounds that the harms significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, namely, it's outside of development limits. That's one. Secondly, it's contrary to policy DP1 local identity and distinctiveness. DP4, harm to the landscape. And DP part 1 of DP16, which is loss of public open space.
Okay, we're there. So we're going to go for the vote. Okay, all those in favour of this motion proposed by Martin and seconded by Claire, say hands in the air, please. 6. All those against?
3.
And abstentions?
2.
Okay. Okay, so it's carried.
So the application stands refused, Chair.
It is, yeah. Yeah. Okay, Phil, we'll just wait for you to get your seat. And then we will move on to agenda item 6. And I think that is Lorna for the rear of 16 High Street, Shepton Mallet. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have an application at the rear of 16 High Street in Shepton Mallet. So the application is for the conversion of an existing building to a 3-bedroom dwelling. So this just shows you the location. Where it says post office, that's what people know as now Morrison's Local in Shepton. That is the crossroads in the centre of town. So you're going down, wrong way down the high street, and there is the access off between 2 retail units. There is no vehicle access to the site, and the building is actually round the back and is also visible from what is the Morrison's car park, but you'll see that from the photo shortly. So you can see the red line. The hatched area is a shared access, and the remainder of the red line goes completely around the outside of the building. And so these are, as I say, the building is in existence. It was granted permission in 2007 for the demolition of a previous building that was there and the erection of this replacement building for office accommodation. The building was substantially completed, but the office use was never implemented. So the site, just to make you aware, is within a conservation area. Number 16 is actually grade 2 listed. So this building counts as curtilage listed because it is physically attached to number 16. And we are within the phosphates area. So I'm going to show you the building there. So these are the floor plans. So you've got a 3-bedroom dwelling, ground floor, first floor bedrooms, and then you've got an office space within the roof. So these are the photos. So this is the access point. As I said, explain this is a shared access. And obviously it is within the high street of Shepton Mallet, so there are a lot of businesses around. So that is the access, that gap there. And that is the building in the corner that's taken from the centre of the car park. These were taken this morning, hence the snow. So there we go, you can see, so the building is in the right-hand side. Whilst that is an open gate, there is nothing in the application, so there is no access from this car park. The access is from the high street. So it just happened that that gate is open, which makes it easier for visibility, obviously. And there is an inner wall that you can see in the photo on the right-hand side. So actually the red line runs along that wall. Again, that just shows you that is all a completely shared area in the left-hand photo. It isn't a private space, completely shared. And then this is the right-hand photo is within the car park, just to show those are the lower floor windows. The space adjacent to those windows is a parking space that belongs to one of the businesses within the high street. So any occupiers of the dwelling would not have use of that space or control over anything parking in it.
Again, this is just to show that these are taken from stood next to one of those windows, just to show the outlook from those windows. Bear in mind that is in daylight, it is not lit. There's very minimal lighting within that area of an evening. So it is recommended for refusal on 3 reasons. The reasons I do apologise, couldn't make them bigger without making them more complicated. So it is recommended for refusal on the grounds of the phosphates. At this point, the applicant or agent have not submitted any phosphate information, not any phosphate calculator, budget calculator, or offered any form of mitigation. It's also recommended for refusal on the restricted size and setting of the site and a cramped form of development, and will not give sufficient amenity space for the proposed occupiers of the dwelling. And it gives an overall poor quality, poor living environment. And then the third reason is that there is no off-street parking offered as part of the application. There is only pedestrian access to the site. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lorna. So first person who wishes to speak is no public speakers. So we go straight to the committee. I think Edric put his hand up first. So Edric it is.
I've lived in Shepton for a long time. I'm also on the town council, obviously not on the planning board as to sit on this one. And whilst I'd like to see all this area tidied up and developed, this is totally unsuitable. I totally agree with Lorna, and I think we should support this. I'm happy to propose we go in line with officer recommendation and refusal. It's just not suitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Edric. Who would like to speak next? Martin L. Yeah.
Chair, I will simply second Edric's proposal.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ros.
Thank you, Chair. 2 things. One is I'm conscious that I'm not aware that there is a specific plan for the centre of Shepton. And while I think we would want to encourage a retail activity in the high street, this was then approved for office. I now appreciate that office activity is probably less of a demand. And so what do we anticipate this area being used for? Because while I don't disagree, but not only do we build the smallest houses in Europe on modern housing estates, but we actually have a residential property, again, as the officer said, inappropriate. But where is the plan for that particular site in terms of policy?
Edric, yeah, you can come back on for that particular Shepton Mallet must have something going on.
There are plans afoot to do stuff from a developer who's signing back up, but nothing's come forward yet. I'm well aware that one of the local landowners who's trying to redevelop that large area in behind there wants to bring stuff forward. But as far as I know, and that's when the officers can like me, there's nothing on the table yet that's going to come before us, which might lead us as a body of people to look towards this with a favourable light.
Thanks, Edric. Does that sort of help a little bit, Ros?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Dawn, you're next.
Thank you. I just have a question. If the phosphates budget calculator and mitigation is a priority, why has it come to the committee without it?
Yeah, Lorna.
Quite simply because the applicant hasn't submitted it. And it's an old application, and the guidance we are given as officers now is that we are not sitting on phosphate applications. There are now credit schemes, etc., and options available to applicants. So if they are not forthcoming to investigate those, we are proceeding with the applications and proceeding to decisions on them.
Okay, thank you, Lorna.
So can I just come back on that?
You can come back, yeah.
I just wanted to know then, why can't it just be refused at officer level if it's that important?
It was referred to the chair and the vice chair because it's contrary to parish. The parish council didn't object, so it was contrary. So scheme of delegation, it goes to the chair and vice chair who've requested it to be brought to committee.
Thanks. I thought I'd just save it a bit of time.
Sorry if I waste 5 minutes of your time. Barry.
Thank you, Chair. Lorna, from a practical point of view, would it be possible that they could ever do phosphate mitigation on this particular property?
Absolutely. There are credit schemes available throughout the county. They could buy phosphate credits to overcome that reason for refusal.
Okay. So the only real reason for refusal that's left if they did come back is that they haven't got any on-site parking.
No, and the lack of amenity space. So reason 2 would still stand, that it is a poor quality living environment, etc.
Thank you.
Yeah, Claire.
Short and sweet, Chair. So I support the officer on this. It's very clear. I use that car park when I get my Chinese takeaway, and lots of people use that car park going in and out. So I can't see where the space would be for residents. So,
Okay,
yeah,
thanks,
support the
Claire. I think you're fine. Mick, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I'm not familiar with the area, but is it used or could it be used as an office as we speak?
Lorna, yeah?
Yeah, so the permission, the 2007 permission gave, was for it to be built and used as an office. So it has been built, the permission has been implemented. So should they choose to, they could implement the use of the office without any additional consent from ourselves.
Okay, well, that makes me feel better because it won't be a wasted building. And I don't know what the restrictions on that. There are a lot of potentially craftsmen who want to use small areas like that. And I wondered if that would make a good workshop for someone, as long as the usage was not going to upset the locals.
Well, that's for them to come back with a different day, whatever they want to do. I'm looking for a proposal. Oh, you did? Did you? I didn't. I missed that bit. Okay, let's have a vote. Who is going to go along with the officer recommendation? Okay.
11.
That's it. That's unanimous.
House.
Thank you. Right, that's that one done. Sorry I wasted your time on that one. Somebody might have twisted my arm. Okay, next we're going to item 7, which is the lodge at Little Pennard Lane, East Pennard. And Lorna, that's yours again.
Bear with me.
Can do that. I've got to get it as well. Well, I've got to get it.
Right. Oh, apologies. I've just realised I've got the wrong agenda item on the top of my slide there. That'll teach me not to copy and paste. So this is an application for the lodge at Little Pennard Lane in East Pennard. It's for the demolition of outbuildings to be replaced by a single outbuilding, the erection of a gate to an existing access and associated works. Okay, so this is the location. So we are south of Shepton Mallet. Most people, if you drive, so you're driving past the turning for Happy Landings, and then you go up the hill, and this is the junction at the top of that hill. So we have, so just to show at the moment, so the lodge is actually the dwelling on the right-hand side. This site is the piece of land on the opposite side of the road. So just to be clear, this is now become a part retrospective application. So whilst it says the existing site plan, that is not the site as it is today. I haven't been out this morning because of the weather. When I drove past it on Saturday, that is not the site as it stands on Saturday. So that, but this again is an old application. So the proposal, the site plan shows the gate there and the single building, and with the associated works, you can see there's a hedgerow in there.
Sorry, Ross, you wanted to say something?
Yes, just ask a question. Sorry, have you finished? No,
No, not finished yet.
Oh, my apologies. I was putting my hand up for when you're finished.
Okay.
Okay, so this is just a zoomed in version, just to make it a bit clearer. So just to clarify, you'll note that the existing shows that the access being measured from those plans, it's approximately 57 metres from that junction at the brow of the hill. These proposed plans show the access as 36.5 metres from the brow of the hill. So whilst the description of development says a gate to an existing access, the plans clearly show the access being moved. So just that is in the report, but just to clarify that in there. All right, so this is the plan of the building. It's a simple single-storey workshop building. So that is the existing access as you're going south. I do apologise, these are older images. As I say, I would normally go out, but the weather failed to have the most up-to-date images. So you can see the little lodges, the dwelling on the right-hand side and the site on the left. As I said, on Saturday when I drove past, the site has pretty much been cleared. It is. I know the parish council made comments to tidying up the site. The site is tidy. That's the building. The building is now complete. So there is the roof on it, hence why this is now a part retrospective application, because that building has been completed. Again, this is just from the other side. Again, you'll note on the plan where that red van is parked is marked as grass. There is no authorised parking or access at that point. And the proposed plan also shows the hedgerow, where you can see it stops at the end of the building. The proposal was for the hedgerow to come all the way out to behind the traffic sign. And just to give some context, obviously no one could safely stop and take that photo, to show the context of the dwelling on the left-hand side. You can see a pedestrian path has been put in halfway down the building. That's not shown on any form of plans either. So the application is recommended for refusal due to the substandard access onto the A37 and the poor visibility. The proposed access doesn't incorporate the necessary visibility displays which are essential for highways safety. You'll see in the officer report there's more detailed comments which was done from a meeting with the highways officer with regards to gates, the vehicles not being able to safely pull off the road, etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lorna. I'm really surprised we've got no public speakers, and the person who's already done part of this, I would have thought they would have wanted to be here, to be truthful. So I'm a bit surprised. So we're going straight to the committee, and Ros, you were first one. I know that, yeah.
I'm sorry, I jumped the gun. I'm just mystified by this application, and I'm sure there is a good reason that you got something which at face value could mean that the applicant's trying to improve the situation and move the access down. But there are obviously rightly concerns about all the issues on the junction. Have we had that conversation with the applicant or the agent or something? It just feels that we've sort of been wrong. The whole thing feels inappropriate.
Yeah, so the agent was made aware, because this is an old application, that it was recommended refusal. They were made aware of the reason for refusal. As we've said, that the actual building we have no issues with. That it's actually significantly improved the visual impact of the site. It is solely this access that we have concerns about, and the agent was made aware but asked for it to, they were given the choice to withdraw it or proceed to a decision, and they have asked for it to proceed to a decision without making any changes to the application.
Okay, it just seemed to me that the right thing would be to have that conversation, which you've obviously had, so I will support you in terms of the access issue. Happy to propose it.
Can I speak?
Yeah.
I'm happy to second Ross's proposal and actually sort of go back and say, well, you come back with something which fits in what we want, as we don't mind the building, then you've got a good chance of getting through. But as it stands, no, come back with something more suitable. So I'm happy to second your proposal to, in line with officer's recommendation.
Yes, Dawn.
I just have a question. What happens now if we turn it down and they're halfway through?
Well, I'm going to make a guess, but I won't. I'll let them tell you.
With discussions with the agent, we would suggest they put in an application solely for the building. We don't have an issue with the building, so that would be a straightforward. We could approve the building, and that they submit a pre-application advice, so we can have a discussion as to what would be acceptable. If they, we're assumption there's been no details that they want to make the site more secure, hence they want to gate it. So we would suggest that they have the discussions with Highways as to how they can achieve what they want whilst complying with the highway safety concerns.
I think that makes very good sense. Right? Okay, does anybody else wish to say anything? No? We're all okay, go to the vote then. So we go along with officer recommendation proposed by, I think, Rod, and seconded by Edric. Okay, all those in favour? Unanimous, so great, that one's through. Done. Thank you, Laura. Nice and quick. Next, we're going to move on to agenda item, I think it's 8. Yeah, agenda item 8, which is land west of Mount Pleasant Farm, Buckland, Dinham. And Carlton, this is one of yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Hope everyone can hear me.
Yeah.
Right. This is an application on land just southeast of Buckland, Dinham. It's a parcel of agricultural land, and the application is for the erection of sort of temporary custom-built agricultural dwelling on the site. So I'll just talk you through. This is the location of the site, an isolated location just outside the settlement of Buckland, Dinham. It's about just 2.5 acres roughly of land, and the red areas where they hope to erect a dwelling. So this site plan is a proposed location of a dwelling. It's a simple sort of log cabin type arrangement with a sedum roof. There we go. It gives a cut into the site. This is the diagram, obviously difficult for you to read there, but it just gives an explanation of how the land will be planted out, etc. It's essentially, the application has been brought forward as an agricultural workers dwelling to support the 2 acres of land around it as a small sort of hobby farm. There's some photographs of the site. First one on your left is, well, they're both taken from below the ground down by the stream and looking up at the site from the bottom 2 corners. So it's quite an isolated site in the countryside. The blue arrow there on the right-hand picture shows where the applicant's house is currently, which they rent within the village, just up the hill. So there's, in terms of principle, the council has its policy DP 13 for agricultural workers dwellings. Very necessary policy in this rural area that we all live and work in. The council does approve many applications for agricultural workers dwellings every year. The policy is also supported by the NPPF. which suggests that if there is an essential need, which echoes our policy, then we should be granting planning permission. The assessment in this case is we did not feel that there is any essential need to support the functional requirements on this very, very small sort of hobby farm. The activities could quite simply be undertaken on the site during normal working hours, etc., those of a farmer, albeit, and the person could live elsewhere. The other part of it is that our policy is divided into two separate parts. Obviously, the first part being if you haven't got an agricultural enterprise, which this is the case here, then we might be able to give you an opportunity to prove yourself over a certain period of time in granting temporary accommodation. We don't consider this development with the sedum roof, etc., meets with the definition of temporary, as in that described in the Caravan and Camping Act. So we consider it to be a permanent dwelling. So it obviously doesn't at all meet with the second part policy. Sorry, it doesn't meet with all the second part of the policy, which says that in order for a permanent dwelling, the holding needs to be established for several years, and with at least one of those years, the site be profitable. At the moment, there's no obviously accounts for the property, for the enterprise at all. So the council is recommending the application for a single reason for refusal, in terms of it fails to meet with this policy DP 13, and essentially represents with regards to being an unsustainable development in the countryside, unsupported by DP 13. And when you apply the tilted balance in this case, we consider the harm and impact on the countryside and unsustainable location, which councillors all be aware from this morning's meeting. The description under policy 11D marks being in a sustainable location as a key reason for refusing it within the tilting balance. So that is the sole reason for refusal. In all other respects, in terms of highway access and the character of the building itself within the setting and neighbouring amenity, etc., it all have limited impact if it were acceptable in principle. So no ecology issues to consider or anything like that. It's purely that unsustainable location with a scheme for an isolated dwelling that fails to meet our DP 13 policy. Thank you.
And thank you, Carlton. We only have the one speaker, which is Jane Stevens, who is the applicant, please. And you'll have 3 minutes, Jane.
I'm applying for a temporary agricultural dwelling so I can commit to building a sustainable rural business, supplying the local community and the village pub with sustainably grown produce. I've owned this land for over 4 years and I've tried to establish the business while commuting. However, this has proven inefficient and has even contributed to livestock death. With the housing and rental crisis, there are no viable alternatives. Most rentals don't allow pets or the running of a business, and I would need to drive back and forth multiple times a day just to meet basic animal needs. The officer's recommendation to refuse is based on the belief that there's no essential need, but there is, as detailed in my supplementary information. Animal welfare is not a 9-to-5 responsibility, it's round-the-clock care. For example, kidding happens all year round, and immediate attention is needed even in the middle of the night. Bottle-fed lambs and kids need feeding every few hours, and no rental will accommodate this. Incubators and day-old chicks require constant supervision to prevent fatalities. These tasks cannot be managed remotely or with occasional visits, they require on-site presence. The officer also raised concerns about acreage and labour requirements, but these are based on incorrect assumptions. The estimate they cited refers to year 3 and not year 1, and I have plans to expand the land and grow the business further. I will be using permaculture methods which are time intensive but incredibly productive and sustainable. These practices are proven to yield significantly more produce per acre compared to commercial farming. A local business, Valid Veg, successfully obtained planning for their agricultural dwelling when they grew their produce in just 1.9 acres out of their 7.5, with labour requirements similar to mine. Importantly, DP13 does not set any minimum acreage or livestock numbers. Our village produce boxes are already oversubscribed, showing clear demand and financial viability. The report claims the dwelling will harm western views and is isolated, but there are 3 houses and 2 large wooden workshops within 50 metres of the proposal. As shown in my additional documents, the dwelling will barely be visible, and planting additional trees will further reduce any visual impact. Concerns about the mobile cabin's permanence due to pad foundations can also be addressed. Alternatives are available. The manufacturer confirms that a cabin is easily dismantled, qualifying it for DP13. It's a wildflower roof, not a sedum roof. Both local and national planning policies support sustainable development and economic growth in rural areas. There's nothing more intrinsic to rural vitality than happy livestock and fresh produce feeding the local community. And in conclusion, the sustainable nature of the proposal, the clear animal welfare needs and the demonstrated community benefits make this application reasonable and necessary at this stage. Therefore, I respectfully ask that you grant permission for a temporary dwelling for a period of 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Cheers. Okay, we have no one else speaking publicly for or against, so I throw it open to the committee. Mick is straight in there, and
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just to clarify that it's not a problem with the building not being movable, is it? Because I know sometimes there's a definition of what is a temporary building. It's to do with the fact that the applicant can't demonstrate that they need to live on the site for economic reasons. Is that clear? Carlton, could the chair get that clarified?
well, I can say that that's the reason, but I want. Where's Carlton to? He's at the other end. I tell you, I can't see you when you're at that end. Yeah, I think Carlton can tell you.
But if you look at DP13, it's in 2 parts. So for a new enterprise, you do a business case, right? And we allow you to put like a caravan on the site. So the application comes in for a very simple caravan that meets for the caravan and camping license dimensions, etc., and movability of easily movable structure. And then we look at the business case, and if we think that there's a clear functional need for someone to be there 24/7, right, because of the sheer level of work. So the key is essential, right? Then we look at that. In this case, we're looking at that as because but we consider that the dwelling is, because of the nature of its construction, is more than steps outside of what we consider to be a temporary building. So it's not as simple as your question.
Okay, so it's the building itself can't be described as movable because it's a cabin which is not on a wheeled base. Yes, so that's one problem, and the other problem is that you haven't had a business case on that area being financially viable for someone having to live there 24 hours. Yeah. Okay, that's clarified it.
Okay, thanks, Mick. You're okay. I think Ros, you're next.
I think this is a difficult one. I think all of us want to encourage new enterprise in the countryside and to encourage people to do something different, but at the same time contribute to the local economy. However, I think it's fairly well recognised that you need to start with a caravan, which is very, very movable, which is recognised as a temporary building, rather than something which could suddenly get Q class or some other excuse to build a house in the countryside, which, sadly to say, planning creep is what we see every day of the week. So I would be delighted if the applicant came back with a proposal for a caravan, and together with a plan as to how you're going to grow. And you've obviously got some jolly good ideas in terms of supporting local businesses. So put the two together, and I think we could probably be looking at a very different outcome. But what we have in front of us, I'm sorry to say, I think I have to go with the officer recommendation for refusal. However, doesn't mean to say that you can't rethink the application, and I think it would have a lot more positive outcome.
Thank you, Ros. And I've got to say that I tend to agree with what you just said. Okay, I think Edric wants to come in next. Yeah, I think Edric was first, Claire.
I won't bother speaking. I totally agree with Ros.
Okay, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. A quick question. The supplementary information that came through, because I didn't hear that said by the speaker about the business model and sustainability. Did that change anything for you? Was that in the right direction for you when you were assessing the planning application?
No, we assessed it as essentially a hobby farm, and there's acres and acres of case study that we relate to in appeals and case law. And generally, if the accommodation is for a hobby farm, it very seldom meets the functional test. The policy is there for large enterprises, where there is an overriding essential need for an agricultural worker to be on site.
Just quickly come back. Is hobby farm a technical term? Because with respect, it sounds a bit derogatory. And I did like listening to the speaker, where there's like hard work, heart and soul, customer base, a lot of time building something up. So I just wanted to check on that reference. It might be me, I've just not heard of it, but it sounds a bit derogatory.
It's certainly
Yeah, I've certainly heard of it before. Claire?
Feel a bit disrespectful and derogatory to somebody who's probably trying to set up a business. 'Cause it's really hard setting up a business. Being a sole trader is very difficult.
I don't think anybody would disagree with that comment. Right, Barry.
Thank you, Chair. For the benefit of the applicant, Carlton, if they came back to you and said, yeah, I'll put a mobile home in there as opposed, or a caravan, call it what you will, could they do this by stages, put that in there and then come back with a plan afterwards? And would that necessitate a complete new application? I'm just trying to save this poor woman money if we can find a way around her problem.
Yeah, it would be a whole new application, but I'm not here to provide advice to the applicant in terms, but it would be a lot simpler if there was a clear establishment for a couple of years of some financial returns on it that would help the application, and at the moment there isn't.
After the mobile home had been put in place?
No, at the same time.
Same time. Okay.
Yeah, you don't, what I've said, and I agree, obviously, at the moment, the applicant lives just up the road and could be on site, and according to the application. And I think if they are seriously working on the site and creating that business, which is commendable, but you've got to create that business and have those accounts to show to us. And if you came in with 3 years, we might even be in a position to provide a more permanent dwelling as what's being proposed. But at the moment, there's very little for us to go on other than just a business case.
Thank you, Carl.
Okay, we've got Mick, you're back again.
I am. And I just wanted to wonder, because I noticed the site is a strange shape enclosed within a larger field. If the applicant was to come back and ask, let's say, for a mobile home or a caravan, it'd be interesting to know what the definition of that is so she can make a choice. But maybe that's something she's going to have to research. But if she was able to get some sort of plan from the landowner of that field and say that if I need to expand, can I? That would give you more financial viability in the long term, because sometimes there is a size which makes something like this work. And I'm thinking of a venture in Frome called Vallis Veg, very successful. I get a veg box from them. They started off having to apply for temporary accommodation and worked up the business case. And, it's a great business now, but they did have to start at that bottom end. And I think having the land available to you potentially, or the fact that you can expand, would be something I would suggest that the applicant would investigate, because it means that her business isn't finite in that respect. It could expand. That's just my only comment, really. And I think possibly I might feel I need to abstain or refuse this, because it's quite difficult to approve at the moment.
Just an answer to that.
Thanks, mate.
Unfortunately, the only land that we're knowledgeable is the site itself that surrounds the little red area.
Okay, thank you. We've got Phil next, I think, then.
Sorry, Chair. I would very much like to have supported this application. I think it's supporting other village businesses in the village, and that rural community of that area. It is a very rural area. But what I can't understand is the map we've got on our screens is different to the map we had on the big screen. Totally different. Don't know if that can be explained. I also know, which is probably not material planning permission is today, that you can get buildings like they want on your land without planning permission. So I was reading about it yesterday.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
But that last comment is.
I'm sorry, I can't take that from you. Yeah, who'd like to come back?
Yeah, if I can, Chairman, just to help members. So through Carlton's presentation, he has sort of set out the case for the refusal, and it's twofold essentially. Based on the evidence that's submitted, that includes additional information. As officers, we don't think that there is an essential functional need to live on the site, and it's not a case of whether the applicant's got anywhere else to live or not. It's whether or not the activity that they are undertaking on the site requires them to live on the site in order to successfully carry out the agricultural use of the land. So again, I think that's something that a few of you have asked. If they come back in with an application for a mobile home, would that change? Would that change our officer recommendation? No, it wouldn't, because effectively the use of the land, in our view, we don't consider there's an essential or functional need to live on the site to carry out the activity. And then the other point, again, in terms of what you've got in front of you, in terms of the information with this application, there is an element of engineering works, which is why we're saying we don't think it is effectively a temporary unit. So there's some retaining walls, again, not what you would deliver if you were just placing the caravan on site. But effectively, it's two reasons why we're recommending refusal. One, the nature of the development. Secondly, more importantly, in terms of your policy, it's the fact that based on the information provided, we don't think there's an essential functional need to actually live on the site.
Okay, does that clarify for everyone? Yeah, Rob?
Thank you, Chair. Well, can I just propose that we accept the officer's view and refuse the application for the reasons stated? Thank you.
You can propose, and Ross is seconding. Yeah, okay. Any, Martin, you'd like to comment? No, Martin D first, followed by Martin L.
I don't know if this can be answered around the table without going back to the applicant. Where does the applicant live? I can't hear, sorry.
Carlton, you know, don't you?
Sorry to disturb, the online sound seems to have disappeared.
No, it's okay, Shane. No, okay, thank you for your help.
Chair,
It's not a material consideration.
They were trying to communicate with us. We either let them speak to us or not. It seems I'm hearing half something about homelessness, and I just wondered if we could hear it or not.
For the benefit of the board and people online, I heard the applicant say that they've unfortunately been made homeless. Unfortunately, that isn't a material consideration relating to the planning, even if it does tug at people's heartstrings.
Okay, sorry. Right, Martin L.
I think I'm going to come back on that. I'm hearing from the case officer that the person lives just down the road. The applicant said, we don't live down the road, and I can't operate the business at the distance I have to operate it from. So I think there is a slightly material consideration there. That actually, if you want to run the business this way, I've got to where does the person live? Because if they don't live there and they're not in close proximity, then there's a struggle to operate the business. Thank you.
Hang on, Ros.
We need to be a degree consistent on this. A number of applications have come forward to us, and I think of the research farm at Launchley, where you've got an established business, it's many years old, you've got a lot of monies, and the argument was that you needed to be on site. And for a number of reasons, and I'm not going to go into them all, the officers deemed that it wasn't a need to be on site, it hadn't been proven. Now, if that's the case there in an established business, then I guess what we've got here is the same situation, but without any of the business case backing or history or everything. And therefore, reluctantly, as I said at the beginning, I would like to propose that we go with the officer's refusal.
And it's been, it has been seconded, so I'm afraid we're going to go to the vote and push it from there. So all those in favour of going with the officer's recommendation? No, I'll have to do it as well. Oh, no, I'm not. All those against? 3. And abstentions? 2. So it's carried. We've gone with the officer recommendation. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, we now have to move on to agenda item 9, which is, once I can find it, okay, this one is...
It's me again, Chairman.
It's you again, isn't it? Yeah, I got it now. Okay, carry on.
Thank you. This application relates to land next to, well, it used to be an old farm building next to a farmhouse at Boatley Cross at Rodden near Frome. So it's for the change of use of an old agricultural barn to a residential single-storey dwelling and an addition of a single-storey extension to it. So this is where the site is. I think everyone's familiar with it. It's on the Rodden bypass there. This is a slightly closer angle of the site, so you can see the red line around where the building is going to be converted. So it's a part of an older farm complex. This is the existing and proposed site layout. So we can see on the left-hand side the existing layout. Towards the top of the top left-hand side is the main part of the barn, which exists at the moment, and is really good nick and could be converted quite easily in accordance with our policy. What's proposed on the right-hand side is to convert that barn, plus put quite a significant addition to that. And obviously to have utilize the existing access arrangements there onto the site and create some parking out the front. So this is the existing layout. So while there's footings on the right-hand side, where there used to be a barn, all that remains now is the footings. This is the existing elevations. So you can see the top one there to the right. There's just a couple of walls remaining, not much of a building at all. So this is the proposal. Obviously the building on the left, and you can see it outlined in grey, and then the architect has drawn in purple the extended area. And this is the elevations proposed. So that's the building at the moment. And so quite a nice traditional old building. Photograph on the right does show that once upon a time there was a building attached there, but we can't take once upon a time into consideration. And that's about it, I think. So there's essentially just the one reason for refusal. Again, with this application, our DP22 policy for the conversion of buildings does allow, and we would fully, accept that in all respects. This application is really sound, bring back into life that lovely building. But what the policy doesn't do is allow you to create significant extensions. So planning officers' hands are tied in that respect. So it doesn't require major new development in order to make the existing barn conversion acceptable in terms of any size, etc. So essentially what we've done is we've had to recommend the development would result in significant new build, which would contrary to DP22 policy. And in the tilted balance, this is obviously a very isolated development site. So, extending it to that and it's essentially creating a new dwelling house. So under the sustainable banner, it doesn't meet the tests. So on the tilted balance, we can't say that the harm is outweighed by the benefits of bringing forward this isolated dwelling. That's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Carlton. I think we have one member of the public to speak, who is, Debbie. Debbie Buchanan.
Debbie's online.
It's online. Okay. If we can grab her in then for 3 minutes. Are you there, Debbie? Hello?
That's her hand.
You can see the hand.
Debbie, I think it might be *6 on your handset to unmute yourself. You need to unmute.
This is a bit concerning.
So, Debbie, can you hear us? We see your hand up.
Hello.
Oh.
So it's Hugh speaking. Well, we could get Debbie to move over to this computer. Can you hear me?
Yes. Are you a relative of Debbie?
Sorry about the technical problem, and you can actually see us now.
That's great. Thank you, Debbie. Yes, I think you're all right to go ahead.
Yeah, you have 3 minutes, Debbie.
3 minutes, thanks.
Thank you very much for your time. The refusal for planning permission weighs heavily on the opinion that we are doubling the size of the building. From our perspective, this is not the case. The architect has calculated the square footage for the gross internal areas, and the existing barn with the open part of it, and the only part of that that's missing is the roof. It's got really solid 1/2 metre thick walls, and the only piece is the previous owners took the roof off. And that's 47.68 square metres. And the extension part, which is with including the new porch area, is 26.38 square metres. I believe that Helen sent out the pictures where we have like shown visually and from the plans what actually exists versus what would be new. And that's an increase of 55%. And this is really to allow us to have enough living space for 2 people to live there. As already mentioned by Carlton, the footings already exist for the extension, as there was previously a barn there. Our focus for this development has always been on it being sustainable, using as much of the existing structures and materials as we can. It had previously been a derelict site.
I'm just going to take over for a bit. So this has previously been a derelict site with old farm buildings falling to pieces, and it was all extremely overgrown when we took it on. We completely cleared the site and enhanced the immediate setting, salvaged as many much material as we can, including tiles and bricks. And if we don't develop it, it's just going to sit there as an unused barn. We would love to create a small, cozy home for us to retire in within this small existing community of homes. And this single-story home we want to create is suitable for old people and those with disabilities and is relatively close to town. Concerning sustainable transport, you can see we've incorporated a cycle shed, which we can use to store our bicycle to cycle to Frome. There's also local bus service running just past. We've planted 200 trees in the surrounding field, and we're creating an environment for nature to return. And we have seen a number of sparrowhawks, buzzards and owls starting to hunt in the field. And we feel that this residential reuse should be given favourable consideration from you, that would lead to an enhancement of the immediate surroundings and meet the requirements of the policy DP 22 clauses 1 and 2. And so based on our application and the above explanation, we feel that it falls within Mendip's plan to create housing that meets local needs. We're very grateful for you considering our application based on this additional information. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Normally we don't allow a second person to speak as like that unless you've registered, but we've allowed it today. So, okay, if you'd like to turn your video off and we'll get on with the discussion. Thank you very much. Cheers. Okay, there are no one else to speak. As such, who would like to be the first one in the committee? Mick.
I don't want to set a precedent, Chair, for being the first to speak, but I'm going to do it again. I think this is, I've had a look at this, and I think it's, although it's above what the planning officer says is normally allowable, I think it's only just over that, but it does provide accommodation which would allow 2 people at least to live in it comfortably. And I think otherwise, I think probably that barn will remain unoccupied. And I know it's not right in the centre of Frome, or not as sustainable. I think in this instance, I would be minded to vote for it and against officer recommendation, because it's literally sort of I don't think that there is much in the way of harm, and there is some benefit.
Okay, thank you, Mick. Ros, you're next. I think it was Ros. Yeah, it's Ros. It is you, Ros.
Sorry. Q-class barn conversions have come through the planning committee over the last few years, and most of them infuriate the hell out of them because they are either far too new and therefore they're being deliberately planted to be converted, or they are so dilapidated that the reality is that there's nothing really left to preserve. However, the pressure has always been to accept the Q-class, and I think this one is no different from many others. I think there is enough of a justification. it is small, which I think has a lot to commend, and even with and I assume that they will be the normal conditions, so it can't be extended further. And we actually create a residence, a home for relatively smaller number of people. And I think it's probably as beneficial use of that piece of land as anything else. Therefore, I would be happy to accept this as it stands.
Thank you, Ros. Did anybody wish to answer Ros on that one? No? Okay. You're pointing at somebody.
Yeah. Mr. Howe over there, Phil.
Yeah, Phil.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't want to get a reputation of being the last speaker, so and I'll make it simple and short. I would like to propose that we go against the officer's recommendation, and I support exactly what Mike and Ross has said.
Second.
Thank you. And take, yeah, who's the seconder?
Phil seconding Ross, I think.
Yeah, Phil seconding Ros. Yeah. Simon?
Yeah, members, just to say, when you're completing the vote, you need to confirm if you're approving the application as a departure from the development plan, or if you consider that it is in accordance with DP22. Again, you can approve it as a departure and find in favour under the planning balance. So you've obviously heard what our advice to you is, that what's proposed does go beyond DP22. And if you are going to recommend approval, if you can delegate that the officer agrees with the chair and ward members, the conditions, that will be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that, Simon. Thank you. Right, who else would like to speak? No one? Oh, Martin, D.
Just a quick one to say that there seemed to be some dispute between Carlton and the applicant over the side, the square footage of the extension. I'm not quite sure. Carlton, can you enlighten us on that at all?
Basically, I'm going with the architect's drawings, essentially, and that's how it was submitted. The applicant themselves seem to have taken a different view on how much can be extended. The architect thinks differently.
In which case, I suggest we go with what Simon suggests. We go as a deviation from the usual plan, to be on the safe side.
I think we'll talk to Martin on this one.
Yeah, I think what Mr. Trafford set out allows you to, if committee are minded to approve the application, allows you to do that. You're just saying it doesn't comply with policy, but the harms of the development don't significantly outweigh the benefits of it. And I think you can make that, and to delegate conditions to officers to impose. Thank you.
Okay, does that sound sensible, everybody?
That's sensible, Chairman. Just to say procedurally, we will have to advertise it as a departure, because we obviously haven't done that. And if we did get any further comments back, we would obviously need to bring that back to you. But I would imagine that might be unlikely.
Okay. Okay, so shall we go to the vote? Yep, it looks like everybody's in agreement. Okay, everybody who is voting to go against the officer recommendation and approve. No, 9. So I think that's unanimous, is it? No? Okay, so against? One abstention, is that right? Okay.
911.
Thank you. So it's carried, it's carried. Okay, thank you. That's that one. We're going to move on to our next one, which is...
Thank you, Chairman. It's me again. So
it is you, Carlton, again, yeah? Yeah. Okay, mate.
Right, this application is for the erection of a dwelling and a carport within the small hamlet of Neybourne, just outside of Oak Hill and Nettlebridge. Give you an idea where the application site is. I don't know if members have been able to pop down and have a look at the site. Obviously, it's approached by a very narrow country lane. And as it twists round to the right there and then back down to the left, it goes down the hill. So it's on quite a steep gradient running down that way. So you've got houses at the bottom here, and then you've got the houses at the top here. Obviously, the very close-knit contour lines there would indicate how steep the site is, but it is relatively level towards this area where they hope to site the house. And this is where it is here. There's been some planning history on this site. Quite a few years ago now, an application was put in for quite a large new dwelling house, which with garaging. So this is an indication of what's sort of progressed over the years in terms of trying to develop the site. So if you look at the yellow area there, it was a house designed along the contours, sort of built into the sloping site, and we recommended refusal, and it went to appeal, and the inspector agreed with us in terms of the design and character and how much it would impact on the valley, etc. Looking up at the site and how it also would impact on Corner Cottage, which is this property here, which is at the lower level. So it'd have quite overbearing impact on that. An application came in, which initially this application came in with a much larger dwelling, which is signified by this sort of pinky colour. And now we've reduced that back to the blue area here. So quite a significant reduction in how the site would now be developed from when it was first refused. Right, so this is the site layout. So Naybourne Lane there on the right-hand side. It's a sort of upside down house. So you come in at the sort of ground floor, but first floor level. So you've got the parking area here and then the main living accommodation, and then you go downstairs to the rooms here. Okay, sort of built into the slope of the site. So this is the roadside elevation. So you're not going to see much from the road, other, you know, the properties across the road are at a higher level and we'll pretty much look over it. This is the other side of that elevation. So that's the east and that's the west. So you can see how much the land drops, the way the house has been built into the site. And that gives you a fair indication of the north and south elevations, of how steep the site is. Right. So this is a cross section of the site. Here is Corner Cottage. Okay. So you can see Corner Cottage here. So the house has very much been put quite far back on the site compared to the originally refused application. So they've tried to take the house as far back as they can away. And there's a lot of planting here, which I'll show you in the photographs in a minute, which essentially create a border between these two properties. This property up here is a recently approved scheme on the other side of the road, and it's a modern type development, and design influences for the scheme have been taken from this development and a smaller one next door built by the same applicant, I understand. So this is this new dwelling I was talking to you about on the other side of the road. So this is the application site, looking up at the application site from the bottom there, from the west. This is another smaller dwelling along this road next to this one, which is similar in architectural styles in terms of use of materials, etc. This is a sort of artist's impression of the proposed dwelling. Okay, so this is the newly completed dwelling, and this is indication of how narrow narrow lane leading down to the site, with the site being in behind this hedge. And this is looking up at the site. That little house over there, that newly completed modern house, and the site is just to the left here, and you can see these existing trees, etc., along here. So the house will be tucked behind there. So hopefully any impact on corner cottages now been overcome. Right. Essentially, because of the remote, isolated location of Neybourne, remote from quite a few services and facilities and what have you, and really unable to be able to, distances too great in terms of walking or cycling and what have you, and the roads around there, if you go onto the main road, it's actually quite dangerous, etc. So it is an isolated location in transport terms. And as I said before, in terms of our tilted balance, while we consider the House has addressed many of the concerns raised by the previous inspector, we still feel that the location is isolated and should be refused contrary to our settlement strategy. And when assessed against policy in the NPPF 11D, in terms of the tilted balance, the benefits of bringing forward one single dwelling, in this case in relation to its isolated location, which is a key reason for, a strong reason for refusing an application now, according to the NPPF, we've recommended the application for refusal on that single reason of being in an unsustainable location. Thank you, Chairman.
And thank you very much. And we'll move on to the public speakers, which will be the first one will be Lucy Hounslow, please. If I've got the name wrong. Okay, Lucy, you have 3 minutes, okay?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for everyone taking the time to listen to me. So firstly, I understand that this application has been referred to you, the planning committee, as the case officer's recommendation differs from our parish councils. And I'd like to say, following a comment earlier made by a council on the panel here, that considering the majority of the owners and occupants of the 9 properties that are going to be directly affected by the proposed applications and have voiced their opinions, none of them for it, I add, to the parish council, they have certainly not listened to our concerns in this instance and represented us as parishioners. In addition to this, the planning application that was submitted in early 2024 has been withdrawn, and nothing else actually added back to the planning portals. Actually had to look for a different reference number in order to find the application when we were asked to attend this meeting or given notice of this meeting. And it's my understanding that with withdrawal came from feedback that the application was not different enough to applications previously submitted and refused, as Carlton mentioned earlier, even by the planning inspectorate. And I'd like to highlight that this is an ongoing application, and it doesn't really change enough from previous ones to make us consider that previous concerns have been rectified. As the owners of Prayer Tree Cottage, which is directly up to the site, we have the following concerns. The latest report states, in this revised location and reduced building footprint, the building is more visually contained, is less visible from the properties to the southwest and the public footpath. Our property, Pear Tree Cottage, sits west of Bradfields Mead, is in direct line with the new proposed west-facing elevation, as are many of the other properties that are around us. In addition, in 2019, the inspectorate considered the effect on the living conditions of nearby residential occupiers, with particular regard to privacy. I quote, he said, in such an expanse of glazing in this location, in any event, present a risk of reflection during the day that would appear out of character with any other comprising buildings and that have a more traditional ratio of solid to void. Yes, the new plan attempts to conceal large parts of the lower level of the building behind grass buttresses between glass window openings west, and the west elevation looks to all the properties residing below, and it's still glass that will reflect the sun, with the main living area needing lighting which will bounce back in the evenings and make the building more prominent from below. The initial plans were influenced by the landscape feasibility study, and this study remains, and that was what was quoted in the latest report. Given the quarrying nature of the geographical area, we are concerned about the makeup of the ground beneath of the site. It's bedrock, loose soil, and has not been investigated that. How we haven't been told how the earth and the stone will be excavated. It's not being considered or covered in the latest report, in the proposal. This also throws up the issue with the access and the tight lane that you saw in the photographs there. My husband drives a small wheelbase van and that only just fits through. Whilst Namerville might not be fully isolated, it is, and it's not a sustainable location with limited village amenities over a mile away. It's not suitable for large construction machinery. There's nowhere to pass or turn, and the fact that the application includes the need to create new access only highlights the fact that this is not a practical place to build. Moreover, I'm now speaking for the other residents when I say, yes, there was another house recently built with similar materials, but that was a property that was there before. The modern design would not fully be supported by services with...
I think you need to wind up now, please.
Okay. And we don't have any resources in our area either that we're going to add to the build.
Okay, thank you. And our next speaker will be Anthony or Laurel.
It's Anthony.
Anthony, is that right?
Laurel knows.
Okay, you get 3 minutes as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm the resident of Sumac House, and our property is adjacent to the southwest boundary of the site, and we continue to object to these revised plans submitted for the residential development of the site, and do so in accordance with the 3 previous objections we have lodged since 2016. The current plans only slightly differ from those presented in previous applications. As stated on page 4 of the design statement, the design concept is little changed from the plans previously prepared by Orm Architects. The main difference between previously rejected applications and this one is the reduction in the siting and scale, as mentioned by Carlton. This application, like the previous applications, is still for a 4-bedroom dwelling and carport and capacity for up to 3 cars and the turning circle contained within the driveway. This being the case, the major concerns cited as reasons for previous refusals remain relevant. The scheme does not satisfy the requirements to significantly enhance the immediate setting either. A previous ecological appraisal from the Crossman Associates states that the site is considered to have local value and that in particular its areas of remnant ancient woodland have an element of fragility and rarity. It is not simply an infill land, and the continuous use of the word scrub in the application to describe the site underscores the effort to diminish the perceived value of the land. The very narrow road, as you've seen, leading to the proposed site is already overused, overburdened and weight restricted. For those that may have visited the site, you would have seen that it's considerably compromised with numerous potholes. Increased use of more vehicles, including construction vehicles, will continue to contribute to the deterioration of this road. Over the long term, crucially, an additional dwelling, especially one with the capacity for several cars, will also mean more vehicular traffic on an already dilapidated road, of which none of our parish services are within walking distance. There are multiple issues that remain unresolved from the previous applications that are not addressed in the current set of application documents, many of which require immediate impact on the surrounding property or have immediate impact on the surrounding properties. There is no clarification about how potential flood and water runoff from the site will be resolved. There is no explanation as to how rock and earth will be excavated from the site and redistributed. At a meeting to discuss the plans last year, it was conceded that no geological survey had taken place to ascertain precisely what rock is present on the site. We have concerns about the use of heavy-duty rock breakers and the impact that this would have on neighbouring properties, and particularly our boundary wall to the southwest. The houses in the area do also not have access to many main services such as sewage, gas, or even broadband internet on fibre. We've been refused internet access via TrueSpeed to have super fast broadband, and there are no other fibre access opportunities, and so internet access remains problematic for the houses in the Neighbourne in this particular bit.
Okay, you've had your 3 minutes.
Very much.
Okay, cheers. And our next speaker will be Richard Gray.
Read out.
And I've got to read that out, exactly. And I've got that right here somewhere, or I did have. No, that's not it. I've got it. Okay, only certain bits of this to be read out. Okay, the green bits, yeah. So here we go. My wife Tina and I have recently purchased Corner Cottage in Naborn. We were recently extremely disappointed to be informed of the proposed building project on land adjacent to our property. We would like to object to the proposed construction for the following reasons. We were initially very attracted to the area due to the beautiful views, gorgeous buildings and cottages dotted around the hillsides. And contribute to the beauty of the area. The proposed construction is in no way sympathetic to the vast majority of these existing buildings and is not in keeping with the local area. Indeed, it couldn't be much further apart. In addition, its location high on the hillside will render it viewable for miles around, a blot on the landscape. Many thanks for your time and assistance, and that's some kind regards from Richard and Tina Gray. Thank you. So I've read that one out. Next we have, I believe, where are we going to here? Yeah, we've got Nigel. Nigel.
Thank you. Nice being here. Long meeting. Very long meeting, in fact. But thank you for allowing me to speak. As members know, your council has a problem with housing supplies. I think it's only now a 2-year supply, which makes the policy of the local plan relating to the location of dwellings and development now out of date and therefore carries limited weight in your decision making. The 2019 appeal, which was for a very large dwelling, failed because it did not respond to its context or fit in with its surroundings. So that is the background to this current proposal. Our client, the applicant, commissioned a design review panel and landscape feasibility study to achieve a high quality development that reinterprets a traditional pitched roof cottage to fit in with its surroundings. Your case officer hopefully confirms that this is not a site in an isolated location but lies within an existing hamlet, that the proposal fits in with its surroundings, that the design principles and material choices are judged acceptable within its context, that it has no harmful impact on the surrounding properties or impact on road safety, and that the local plan policies relating to location development currently carry limited weight. In regards to sustainable development, it is accepted the occupants would be reliant on the private car, but good design and achievement of low carbon economy is also a key aspect of sustainable development. In that regard, the applicant commissioned a sustainability statement demonstrating the proposal achieves passive house principles and CO2 zero emissions. To round up then, this is an innovative, good quality design dwelling that fits in with its context, addresses a previous appeal dismissal. It contributes to the council's chronic undersupply of housing. Unlike the new house opposite, it also helps to raise the standard of design generally in the district. The applicant also has a parish council support. Balance this then against the site's dependence on the private car. We think the balance lies in favour of supporting the application, and I commend the application to you and thank you for your attention. Thank you.
And thank you, Nigel.
Lovely.
Cheers. Okay, that's us through the public speakers, etc. So we're now going to go straight to the committee. And who will be the first to speak? Oh, Edric.
Thank you kindly. Know the area well. I canvassed it as it's part of my division, and I agree with the officers. It's a very, very unsustainable location, very narrow, twisty, tortuous roads to get to. Miles many services. In fact, the parish council supported it, but the parish council is actually based some considerable distance in the main from this location. I don't find it with the general area, the layout of the place, the visibility across the valley is being sustainable, and I certainly don't agree that this is in keeping. I've seen the other new houses built in a similar vein in the locality, and it's more akin to a new built development in somewhere else rather than this small rural hamlet in Somerset.
Okay, thank you, Edric. Who would like to be next? Mick.
Can I propose that we go with officer recommendation on this and then hear what the rest of the members think.
Okay, so we've got a proposal to go with the officer recommendation, but we've still got opportunity for people to speak. So, Barry.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is very reminiscent of the one at downside at Shepton Mallet, where the massive house was put on the side of the hill just because they thought they could. And it was the wrong house in the wrong place, but had it been made a lot smaller, I'm sure it would have gone through the committee. And I think ditto this one. The Carlton slide of the outline of this house relative to Corner Cottage is just massive and overbearing. And I know you shouldn't look at things in isolation, but you think little Corner Cottage down here and this massive great building up here. I think it was made a lot smaller, as Edric said. I'm sure we could find a way of getting it through, but in its present form, and I know this area very well, it's a horrendous place to go to, especially in the winter. Awful.
Okay, thank you, Barry. Anybody else wish to speak? No, we've got a proposal, so we're gonna go to a vote. Okay, all of those people who agree.
Oh, it's been seconded, sorry.
Yeah, it's all proposed. Okay, so it's proposed by Mick and seconded by Edric, the other way around, I'm not sure which. That way around, yeah. That we go with the officer recommendation to refuse. All those in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. So I'm afraid you won't be building your house. Cheers, thank you. Okay, I believe we still have the appeals to go through. So who will be reading those out? Simon?
Chairman, yeah, I can just briefly answer any questions that members might have on the appeals, just to say of the two appeals, two were decisions by this committee, and both those, one of those appeals was dismissed and one was allowed. So the dismissed one was the one Blossoms Restaurant. I think that's down as delegated, but it was a committee decision. So again, recognise the importance of having the phosphate mitigation in place. Land North of Wallbridge Gardens, that was a committee decision in accordance with officer recommendation. You might remember it. It was basically almost phase two of a fairly tight site in Frome, and we presented a recommendation that we thought it was overdevelopment and that it would be detrimental to the neighbouring occupiers and the surrounding occupiers. Unfortunately, the inspector didn't agree with our recommendation or decision, and the appeal was allowed. The first one, land at Summerley, the street till Compton. That's a scheme that has been through due process a number of occasions, and I think, as it's stated there, it's a resub. So again, that gives us some confidence as both officers and members that where development outside of settlement boundary is in an unsustainable location, like you've just done with the last two, that we're still okay to refuse. And the final one was a Class Q application where the appeal was allowed. Again, we're sort of having relatively mixed outcomes on the Class Q applications. We're still trying to achieve the delivery of sustainable development. So where we get an application like Councillor White referred to earlier on, where clearly it's not an application which is suitable without significant additional structural works, we are still refusing. Sometimes inspectors agreeing with us, sometimes they're not. On this occasion, the inspector who was appointed didn't agree with us because, again, we tend to get pole barns where the appointed planning consultant architect says, yeah, this can be converted to a dwelling without adding to the structural integrity of the building, and you only need to look at the photograph to see that that won't be the case. So we're still trying to achieve sustainable development and only approving where we feel there's a strong case in accordance with Class Q. In this case, the inspector didn't agree with us.
Okay, thank you, Simon. I think nobody else got anything. Oh, yeah, Rob.
Just briefly, Chair, can you just briefly inform us the difference between a full planning permission and prior approval?
So a prior approval is effectively the applicant saying, I have got this building. So in terms of Class Q, can I come? So the legislation allows the owner of agricultural buildings to convert them into dwellings as long as they comply with certain criteria, and you make a prior approval application. So the LPA can say if it complies with the criteria. As a planning application where we have a proposal, we assess it against the council's development plan policies, and we assess the merits of the proposal. So no. Just the easiest way of distinguishing between the two. One, we are assessing against government legislation, and we are being asked, does this proposal comply with government legislation? A planning application, we are assessing against the council's own development plan policies. If it might be best if we have a conversation offline, Councillor Reader, and hopefully I'll be able to explain more clearly for you.
Okay.
Okay, Barry.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a question for Simon. The ones where the appeals have been dismissed, well, I understand that it's not going to cost us money usually, but where they have been allowed, what's been the impact of those appeals that have gone against Somerset in the last month, or the ones that you have just read out?
The appeals I've just referred to there was a separate cost claim. So again, there hasn't been a cost claim on those appeals.
Okay, I think we're finished. Well done, everyone. We're done with 10 minutes to spare, and it's been a long day.